Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Barbara Mullenix. Have you done everything right in your life? Most likely, many will say yes. The lives of the figures in today's story resemble a madhouse. Since its inception, alcohol has remained the most commonly used psychoactive substance. It is not surprising that alcoholic drinks destroy families, destinies, and even lives. Barbara Mullenix was born on May 29, 1950, in Munich, Germany. She spent her childhood there and was described as an ordinary child from a family slightly above the middle class. By the age of 18, Barbara got married. She always dreamed of starting a family, but from the very beginning, it was far from ideal. In particular, the strong-willed Barbara turned out to be far from the ideal wife her boyfriend wanted. She was very hot-tempered. After that, she moved to the USA. In total, she went through 3 marriages, all of which ended in divorce. After her early relationships, Barbara had 2 sons, who had already left home by the time of that events. Only her 17-year-old daughter, Rachel, remained living with her. Rachel was born during Barbara's 3rd marriage to Bruce, a man who turned out to be 9 years younger than Barbara. The entire family settled in Oakland, Oklahoma, USA. Bruce was initially attracted to Barbara's vibrant personality, but just as quickly as it drew him in, it began to repel him. A typical cycle of Barbara's relationship problems began to repeat itself. Rachel, born in 1989, became a guiding star for Barbara, as she had always wanted to have a daughter. During this period, her daughter was treated like a princess, and she willingly took advantage of this. Rachel was given the largest bedroom, the best outfits, and extravagant parties for her birthdays. At a young age, she convinced her parents to enroll her in a special private school that required attendance only once a week, allowing her to enjoy a relatively easy life. Rachel was a good student, very athletic and active. She participated in inter-school basketball championships, attended ballet classes, and practiced gymnastics. However, despite all of this, her parents faced major problems. Barbara struggled with alcoholism for a long time, and after Rachel turned 10, her drinking became noticeably worse. According to Rachel's memories, Barbara became a severe alcoholic who verbally and physically attacked her husband and daughter whenever she drank. Once she touched a glass, she would become aggressive. She could grab them by the hair and hit them. This resulted in police being called to their home several times due to domestic violence. The first incident occurred in 2002 when the police found 12-year-old Rachel crying on the street, showing a bite mark allegedly left by her mother. The police reports indicated several bite marks on her back that the girl clearly could not have inflicted on herself. However, she later admitted that she made up the story and asked the authorities not to press charges against her mother. She probably didn't want Barbara to suffer. After such outbursts of aggression, Barbara would often apologize to her family members. When she wasn't drinking, even her ex-husbands described her as kind and sociable. However, all this changed radically once Barbara started drinking again. Her relationships with men fell apart for the same reasons, either due to her alcoholism or the aggression stemming from her difficult temperament. When Rachel turned 13, Bruce, tired of the situation, decided to end the marriage and moved to Newport Beach, California, in search of work. Barbara then decided to move to Tampa, Florida. Typical divorce proceedings soon arose. It was difficult for they to agree on many things. They didn't want to prolong the process. Ultimately, they suggested that their daughter choose with whom she wanted to stay. This was a difficult period for Reiki, as the answer to such questions became too much for her to handle. Her parents ended up in different states, making it difficult for her to visit either parent. In the end, Rachel chose to stay with her mother and moved to Tampa, and her father had to pay child support. This decision shocked Barbara's friends, who were aware of the addiction and believed that this story could not end well. Exactly, the first incidents of trouble soon followed. In 2004, the Tampa police received a call from the home where Barbara and Rachel lived. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, they found a woman in tears. She was very nervous and shaking all over. There were injuries on her body, some of which she clearly could not have inflicted on herself. Barbara was reluctant to communicate with the police, answering questions in monosyllables, but from her words, it was clear that these injuries were inflicted by her daughter, Rachel. At the time of the police's arrival, the teenager had run away from home. One of the arriving officers called Rachel on her mobile phone. She immediately answered and admitted that there had been a quarrel with her mother before leaving. They had fought, and after that, Rachel hung up. In response to subsequent calls, she refused to answer. Ultimately, there was no formal complaint. Barbara refused to press charges against her daughter, and the case was hushed up. Incidents provoked earlier by Barbara in fits of alcoholic aggression ended in exactly the same way. During this period, Barbara continued to drink, and it seemed that the situation was worsening. She did not work, and they lived on benefits and alimony from Rachel's father, but there was clearly not enough money. By 2005, all this led to the fact that she could not pay the rent, which was high. When they were notified of this and given a day to pack, Rachel called her father in Newport Beach and asked if he could shelter her and her mother for a while until Barbara could recover from another binge and get back on her feet. Bruce doubted that contacting his ex-wife again was a good idea, but there was no other way out. Rachel was very convincing and used a trick. She told her father that if he could not shelter them both, they would be forced to look for other housing and would not go to him. Apparently, Bruce really wanted his daughter to come to him, so he agreed to these conditions. Rachel later admitted that she understood that without her, her mother would slide into a marginal lifestyle completely and have no way out. In the hope of saving her mother, she made this decision from the beginning. Barbara understood perfectly well that her ex-husband would be against it, so she was grateful to her daughter for her help. After receiving permission from Bruce, both packed their things and went to California. Newport Beach is now one of the richest and most prosperous communities in the United States, located south of Los Angeles. It has many beaches and premium real estate. Bruce owned an apartment there. In such areas, the crime rate is usually low, and violent attacks are committed extremely rarely, as criminal elements typically seek to profit. Unfortunately, with Barbara's arrival, the situation clearly became tense, which greatly upset Bruce. Despite the fact that the former spouses lived in separate rooms, they almost immediately began to quarrel. For Rachel, this move became an excellent opportunity to get to know the social life of the elite area of America. In any case, she and Barbara were focused on succeeding in the film industry to become famous. Barbara had already taken the first steps toward this dream. She got a job as an assistant on a set, actively attended castings, and made acquaintances. Everything went on as usual until May 2006, when the 17-year-old girl met a young man at a party. He was described as a quiet, athletic guy from a good family, good-natured and hardworking. During this period, he worked full-time, supported himself, was focused on his career and family. A romantic relationship quickly blossomed between them, and soon Rachel introduced him to her family. From the very beginning, the 4-year age difference worried both her mother and father, but after getting to know the young man better, they saw that their daughter had chosen a decent guy who treated her well. They hoped that Rachel would choose this good young man. However, Barbara soon began to exhibit flashes of jealousy. It seemed as though she felt offended by the guy because he was taking up all of Rachel's free time. Rachel practically no longer devoted herself to her relationship with her boyfriend and pushed her dreams about Hollywood into the background. Now, it became obvious that Rachel was not interested in work. Hormones had completely turned her head. Barbara continued to pursue her acting career and even landed a small role in the series CSI, Crime Scene Investigation. The character appeared in one of the episodes in a secondary role, and Barbara was waiting for new opportunities. Considering the age difference between the young couple, Rachel needed official permission from her parents to engage in a relationship with him. However, she was skilled at manipulating her mother and father, often giving them ultimatums. This is likely how she coerced them into signing a document granting their permission. From that point on, the couple could calmly meet. With the high school girl always having this permission to prevent her boyfriend from facing any legal issues regarding the corruption of minors, as specified by law. At the same time, Rachel managed to negotiate very favorable conditions for this agreement. The only stipulation was a curfew set at 1 a.m. However, as practice showed, even this became too serious a restriction for the rebellious Rachel. On August 31, 2006, Rachel accidentally fell asleep at her boyfriend's house and missed curfew. Barbara was furious. Unable to reach her daughter by phone, she went to Ian Allen's house at around 2 o'clock in the morning. Once there, she began knocking on the door, screaming and raising everyone's alarms. She forcibly pulled Rachel out of the house and forbade her from seeing Ian. This was shocking for Rachel, but for a while, Ian and Rachel decided to take a break. 10 days after this conflict, Rachel wrote in her diary that her relationship with her mother had deteriorated to its historical minimum. She openly called her mother a psychopath and reported that she heard threats from Barbara every day. Rachel expressed regret for not leaving for Tampa with her father back then and hoped that Barbara would calm down so that things could return to normal. However, things did not improve. On September 13, 2006, a yacht left Newport Harbor, and the captain noticed something suspicious in the water. He saw a large, tightly sealed cardboard box floating past the ship and thought to himself that it looked like a coffin. Pushing away dark thoughts, he pulled out the suspicious object only to discover the body of a woman wrapped in a bloody sheet. He reported this gruesome find to the Coast Guard. When police officers arrived on the scene, they counted 52 stab wounds to the face, neck, upper body, and back. The most disturbing detail was a knife sticking out of one eye, along with another smaller bloody knife wrapped in the same sheet, which still had remnants of the victim on it. A third knife was simply discarded in the box. All three were ordinary kitchen tools from the same set. The body was sent for an autopsy, where the medical examiner found that 2 of the numerous stab wounds were fatal, having cut the jugular vein and carotid artery. Each of these wounds could have killed the victim within minutes without immediate medical assistance, leaving no chance of survival. The examiner concluded that she had been killed on the evening of September 12, less than a day before the yacht owner's call. The victim remained unidentified until the medical examiner discovered breast implants, each assigned a serial number at the factory, which could be used similarly to dental records. This led the police to identify the victim as Barbara Mullenix. They quickly located the deceased. Detectives went to the house where Barbara lived with her daughter and ex-husband. When the investigators arrived, the house was empty. They began inspecting the territory, and by that time, Bruce had driven up to the house. He stated that he had been on a business trip for several days, about a 2-hour drive from home, and had returned less than an hour ago. According to him, he had not yet seen his daughter or ex-wife, as he had gone to the store for groceries upon his return and had not managed to contact them yet. He confirmed that both of their mobile phones were silent, which he found strange, but he didn't think much of it, assuming they were busy with their own affairs and would return home later. The detectives spoke with Bruce. They learned that he and Barbara had a rather complicated relationship. Despite being divorced, they had been living together again at their daughter's request. The atmosphere in the house was tense, particularly regarding Rachel's relationship with her boyfriend, which worried her parents. Bruce cited Barbara's alcohol addiction and violent behavior while intoxicated as the main reasons for their divorce. He also admitted that Barbara occasionally used illegal substances, further aggravating her behavior. Soon, Bruce became a prime suspect, as he had a possible motive and could have provoked the circumstances leading to the attack. Given that they were discussing a premeditated murder, it was highly probable that the killer should be sought within the victim's immediate environment. Authorities quickly noticed that Bruce did not seem very upset by the news of Barbara's death. He either skillfully concealed his feelings or, most likely, felt more empathy than negativity. Bruce cooperated with the investigation and allowed the apartment to be inspected. During the search of Barbara's bedroom, investigators found a small imprint on the wall that resembled a smeared trace of a bloody hand. In the kitchen, a bucket contained a sponge with suspicious dark spots and a latex glove. It was evident that the hallway had been cleaned. On the table, there was a knife set missing several items that were identical to those found with the victim. With all these facts in mind, suspicions against Bruce grew. The police arrested him and took him to the station for questioning. However, Bruce immediately provided an alibi that was easy to verify. He was indeed hundreds of kilometers away from the city at that time, which could be confirmed through motel records. At the same time, Bruce's colleagues stated that he was working with another client during the massacre. Bruce has been removed from the suspect list. Despite his quarrelsome nature, Bruce had no idea that Barbara might have mortal enemies capable of murder, especially since they had been living together. Rachel was now missing. The police wanted to talk to their daughter. During the inspection of the family's home, no signs of a break-in were found. However, serious concerns arose that Rachel, who had disappeared from all radar, was in danger. Attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. She ignored calls from relatives and law enforcement. Also, no ransom demands received. According to the neighbors, the last activity in the apartment was noticed several days prior. They also learned about Rachel's relationship with her older boyfriend, Ian Allen. Additionally, Bruce mentioned the problems that arose between Barbara and the young couple, including an incident when she took Rachel from Ian's house and forbade Rachel from seeing him. It's possible that Ian and Rachel want revenge on Barbara for interfering in their love affair. The police went to Ian's house to talk to him and find out Rachel's whereabouts. Their suspicions were quickly confirmed. Ian was also missing. His parents said that they had last seen him a few days ago, and since then, they were unable to reach him. They were very worried and were about to go to the police station to file a report about their son's disappearance. The police granted them permission to look around his room. Law enforcement took Ian's laptop for forensic examination. Shortly before his disappearance, he was planning a route to Tampa, Florida. His car was missing from the family home, leading the authorities to declare it wanted and distribute descriptions of both Ian and Rachel. It seemed they was involved in the crime and was now on the run. Authorities began to track the activity of their bank cards, and less than a day later, they recorded a payment at a gas station in Louisiana. On September 15, 2006, one of the officers noticed Ian's car on the road. He was stopped and surrendered without resistance. Interestingly, as soon as the car was stopped, Rachel ran out, approached the officers, claiming she had been kidnapped and held against her will. Although her story appeared unconvincing, Ian was arrested and taken to the police station while Rachel was sent to the hospital. Doctors confirmed that she showed no signs of torture or even forced detention. It seems she was in the car voluntarily, without any coercion. Moreover, during subsequent interviews with law enforcement officers, discrepancies and contradictions were noted in her story. After a medical examination, Rachel was also arrested and taken to the station. She stated that on the night of September 13, 2006, she woke up to her mother's screams. Rachel jumped out of bed and ran to Barbara's bedroom, where she saw her boyfriend stabbing Barbara to death. As soon as he saw Rachel, he punched her in the face, causing her to fall and lose consciousness. She only regained her senses later in a hotel room where he had kidnapped her. He held Rachel there for several days before they began moving towards the state line to escape. Rachel insisted that she had been kidnapped, but the police quickly gathered evidence suggesting that she was lying. At the very least, there were no signs of a punch on her face as she had claimed. Additionally, her DNA samples were found on the latex gloves, the sponges, and even on the tape that was used to cover the box containing the body in Barbara's bedroom. This indicated that she at least assisted in the attempt to remove the evidence. The criminals had cleaned the knives, and there were no fingerprints on the handles, making it possible to reconstruct the course of events only from the statements of the killers. When reviewing the correspondence between Rachel and Ian, investigators discovered that Rachel had been spinning tales about her boyfriend for quite some time, including that her mother was going to kill her and that she faced daily threats. She simply feared for her life. Of particular importance were the girl's messages on the night of the murder, where she wrote to her boyfriend about another conflict with her mother, stating it was time for them to put an end to it. What exactly she meant remained a mystery. Rachel insisted that they had discussed escaping to another state, yet the context seemed more grim. Police reviewed CCTV footage from the gas station Rachel and Ian visited before their arrest. The recordings showed Rachel calmly walking next to her boyfriend, smiling. She was clearly not in captivity. Detectives decided to speak with Ian once more, and until that moment, he had denied any accusations. Finally, Ian confessed that a brutal crime had occurred. According to him, Barbara had threatened that she would press charges against him for the corruption of a minor, fearing that he would lose his job. He believed that Rachel's freedom was at stake, and an unstable, alcoholic woman could ruin his life, which he could not permit. Thus, the young lovers decided that the only way to solve the problem was to kill her. They planned the entire thing together, with Rachel watching for the perfect moment when her mother would be most vulnerable. Thanks to Rachel, he learned that Bruce was going on a business trip at night. He entered the house after Rachel left the door unlocked while her mother was asleep in the kitchen. He took several knives and then attacked Barbara. His first blow landed on her eye. He thought it would instantly kill her, but he was wrong. He could not pull the knife out of her eye socket. Instead of dying, she screamed loudly and began to resist. Out of fear, he kept striking her with another knife because he wanted her to be quiet as quickly as possible. He took the blame for the crime, claiming that Rachel was just watching, then helped to clean the room and dispose of the body. Ian's story sounded convincing but had one flaw. He reported only 2 knives, while police found 3. Investigators believe that Barbara's daughter also took an active part in the murder and used a 3rd knife. They then wrapped the body, along with the murder weapon, in a sheet, placed it in a large TV box, and removed it from the house, eventually throwing it in the water. Bruce's neighbor, Mullenix, confirmed that on that fateful night, he heard loud noises coming from the apartment. He saw 2 young people, a guy and a girl, carrying out a large box at night, which seemed strange, especially since he had heard women's screams just half an hour earlier. It became apparent that they were disposing of a body to attract less attention. After getting rid of Barbara's body, the young people returned. Rachel was cleaning up the blood in her mother's bedroom while her boyfriend was taking a mattress and several other items far from the crime scene to burn. During this time, Rachel was even writing a love message to Ian, clearly not upset by her mother's death. Investigators believe that Rachel actively participated in the crime because she behaved too calmly and did not even attempt to call for help. Instead, she encouraged her boyfriend to finish what he had started. This behavior contradicted her boyfriend's claim that Rachel was petrified with horror during the massacre. In June 2008, Rachel's trial began. By this time, her story had changed several times. Now, the criminal admitted that she had lied about the kidnapping and that she had gone with Ian voluntarily. At the trial, she adhered to a version more reminiscent of Ian's words, saying that she was scared and became an accomplice not of her own free will, but simply out of fear. However, this narrative seemed more like a return to the general legend from which she had initially deviated. Rachel continued to insist that she did not participate in the massacre, simply cleaned up the traces of the crime and helped get rid of the body by packing it in a box. The lawyer failed to convince the court of her innocence, and the jury found her guilty of murdering Barbara. Rachel was sentenced to 25 years in prison. 2 months after these events, the trial of Ian Allen began. When he learned how Rachel had shifted all the blame onto him and also fabricated a story about the kidnapping, he stopped covering for her in anger. He stated that she had been the mastermind of the crime from the very beginning. However, now it was too much. The prosecutor's office convincingly proved that he cold-bloodedly stabbed a defenseless woman in a fit of hatred. Ian was also found guilty and sentenced to a similar punishment of 25 years in prison, despite the guy's words. Even now, many support Rachel and consider her innocent. In particular, her brother and grandparents believe that she is a victim. On October 14, 2022, Rachel was released early from prison for good behavior. She went to live with her father in Newport Beach, California, where he still resides, while Ian Allen is still serving his sentence in a state prison. In January 2024, in northern Chile, a vast and barren desert became the site of a disturbing discovery. Human remains were found buried beneath the sand near the city of Calama, an isolated area where the harsh climate can preserve bodies for a long time. Their thorough examination indicated that the remains had been intentionally hidden. The rocky terrain made digging challenging. Authorities later confirmed that the remains belonged to a woman. Preliminary forensic analysis shows she died from a gunshot wound to the head. Remains identified as those of Javiera Jimenez, who went missing in 2022. Javiera Jimenez grew up in Chile. As the eldest daughter, she developed a strong sense of responsibility early on. Her parents worked diligently to create a comfortable life for their children and instilled values of determination and independence in them. Javiera learned quickly that to succeed, she would need to rely on her own hard work. From a young age, she was known for her energetic and goal-oriented personality. In school, she excelled in academics, especially in math and science. However, her greatest passion was working with people. She had a natural talent for connecting with others. She was always eager to help and foster relationships. As a teenager, Javiera aspired to become a dentist. After finishing high school, she enrolled in college to study dental care, dreaming of becoming a skilled professional and eventually opening her own practice. Determined to advance her career, she balanced her studies with a part-time job as a hostess at a bar, where she welcomed customers and helped create a friendly atmosphere. This job not only provided her with income but also helped her enhance her communication skills. In addition to her studies and work, Javiera was actively building her presence on social media. She began by sharing small posts about her daily life, which garnered a larger audience over time. She collaborated with local brands to promote clothing, cosmetics, and other products. Her charm and engaging personality quickly made her blog popular. Javiera didn't focus only on work and academics. She prioritized personal development, was determined to achieve financial independence. At 18, she moved out of her family home, managed all her living expenses on her own. Her family was proud of her early independence and her ability to overcome challenges. Despite her busy schedule, Javiera always made time for her family, staying close to her mother and brothers, visiting them regularly, and sharing her future aspirations. A stagnant life was never an option for her. She was constantly striving to progress. Before she vanished, she had ambitious plans. She was getting ready to move into a new home, aiming to advance her social media career and continuing her studies. Javiera met Andres Sutter in 2022 through a group of mutual friends she frequently hung out with. Initially, there were no red flags with Andres. He was charming, self-assured, and good at building relationships. He made a strong first impression, appearing considerate, engaged, and truly interested in her life. Soon after, their talks evolved into a romantic relationship. In the beginning, everything felt ideal. He was supportive, encouraged her goals, and admired her independence. However, as time passed, red flags began to appear. Javiera noticed that Andres was excessively jealous. He was uncomfortable with her job at the bar, monitored her interactions, and frequently asked where she was, who she was with. His behavior became increasingly intrusive. He would show up unexpectedly, even when she had told him she was busy. He went through her phone, questioning every new contact. His jealousy became unreasonable. He particularly disliked it when Javiera spent time with friends, especially if men were present. Soon, other troubling issues emerged. Andres was often unclear about his own activities. He didn't have a steady job but always seemed to have money. When she inquired about his work, he avoided giving direct answers. Over time, Javiera discovered that Andres's name was associated with certain groups involved in illegal activities. Among a small circle of friends, rumors circulated that he might be involved in criminal activities, including theft and the illegal trade of copper. The turning point in Javiera and Andres's relationship occurred when Javiera discovered that Andres was living a double life. She wanted nothing to do with illegal activities and didn't want to be involved with someone who could put her in harm's way. Eventually, she decided to end their relationship, stating that she couldn't see a future with him. However, Andres refused to accept her decision. He continued to pursue her, calling her frequently, showing up uninvited, and trying to persuade her to return to him. He dismissed her rejection, believing that she would eventually change her mind. As Javiera started to avoid him, Andres became even more persistent, threatening her by claiming he knew everything about her and wouldn't allow her to leave. Javiera had no idea that their breakup would have serious consequences. On August 26, 2022, Javiera's day began like any other. She and her mother, Gladys Galagillos, went to a shopping mall, had lunch, and discussed the changes coming in Javiera's life. Javiera is moving out. She was excited about this new chapter. During their conversation, Javiera expressed her ambitions for the future. She discussed her goals of advancing her career, increasing her income through social media, and completing her education. Her enthusiasm and drive were evident. Her mother felt happy seeing her daughter so excited. After their outing, they returned home, where Javiera assisted her mother with household chores, then folded the things into the suitcase. Later that evening, before leaving, Javiera mentioned to her mother that she intended to spend the night at a friend's house. This was not unusual, as she often stayed over with friends. Once she arrived, she and her mother continued to text each other, as they usually did. Everything seemed perfectly normal. However, as midnight approached, a text arrived that changed everything. Andres messaged her, "I found you, dog." This news was monumental for Javiera, as her dog, Lucky, had been missing for a few days, and she had been searching tirelessly. She had even posted on social media, offering a reward for Lucky's safe return, so she immediately reacted to Andres's message. Then she stopped texting her mom. A few hours later, all attempts to contact her by phone were unsuccessful. The next day, Javiera was expected to come home, but she never arrived. Her family started reaching out to her friends, but no one knew her whereabouts. Her sudden disappearance left her loved ones in distress. They had only two clues: their last conversation with her and a message that later became crucial in the investigation. Javiera's disappearance caused deep concern for her family and friends. However, the one person who seemed unconcerned was Andres. When her mother finally managed to reach him, he responded in a detached manner, showing no signs of worry. When Gladys inquired about her daughter's location, he calmly stated he had no idea and then proceeded to share his version of events. That night, he met with Javiera to help her search for her missing dog. They drove to several places but couldn't find it. To distract her, he suggested going to Calama, his hometown. Javiera agreed. She had a suitcase with her because she was moving the next day, so it seemed she might have intended to stay at his place overnight. However, his account became less clear from there. He claimed they had an argument during the trip. Suddenly, Javiera realized that her suitcase was missing. She thought it might have fallen out of the trunk. Distressed, she insisted they go back to look for it. According to Andres' testimony, he left Javiera at the entrance to the city of Calama while he returned to retrieve a suitcase that fell out of the truck they were both traveling in. This version of events was confusing. Javiera was supposedly left alone on a highway at night, far from the city, without a way to get home or call for help. However, Andres made no effort to persuade her to return to the car, nor did he check if she was safe. Gladys immediately sensed something was wrong with his account. When she pressed him for details, Andres began to contradict himself. At first, he said he had dropped her off near Calama, then he changed it to somewhere on the way back to Antofagasta. He couldn't remember the exact spot, which raised further suspicion. When Gladys asked why he hadn't called her or any of Javiera's friends to inform them that he left her alone at night, Andres hesitated. He said he thought she was just upset and would find her way home. A few hours later, he altered his story again, claiming that he had been in a car accident after leaving Javiera. He said another car had collided with his from behind, and he went to the hospital for a checkup. This, he explained, was why he didn't go back to look for her. Late Saturday night, almost 24 hours after Javiera went missing, her mother received an unexpected and concerning message from an unknown number. It read, "Mom, it's me. I left. There was an accident. I need some time. Don't worry about me. I'll come back once everything is settled. Love you. Take care of Grandma and my brother." Gladys read the message repeatedly, sensing something was amiss. The tone felt distant and impersonal, which alarmed her, but the errors stood out even more. Javiera was always meticulous with her texts, avoiding shortcuts and spelling mistakes. This message, however, was filled with typos and awkward phrasing that didn't match her style. Gladys tried to call the number, but the call failed. The phone had already been turned off, increasing her anxiety. Worried, she showed the message to Javier's friends, and they all agreed Javier would never write something like this. They recognized her usual texting style and emotional expressions. The content of the message was also suspiciously vague. Where was she? What kind of accident had occurred? Why hadn't she provided more details? Why send a cryptic message from an unknown number instead of calling? Gladys took immediate action and reported the message to the police. They documented it as a potential attempt to mislead the investigation and distract from a possible crime. A task force was quickly assigned to the case. Investigators traced the message to its originating SIM card. The phone carrier confirmed it was linked to a false identity, a common method used when buying anonymous prepaid cards. Next, law enforcement tried to locate the phone. They hoped to find its general location, but it had been turned off shortly after the message was sent. The last known signal placed it near Calama, the same area where Andres claimed to have last seen Javiera. Further examination revealed that the phone had only been used once, suggesting the message was pre-planned and aimed at deceiving her family into believing she had left on her own terms. Experts analyzed the content of the message and found that it did not match Javiera's usual writing style. The errors and unusual phrases were clear indicators that it was not written by her. This finding became a crucial piece of evidence, suggesting that the message was fabricated and indicating that Javiera did not disappear voluntarily. As a result, investigators began treating the case as a potential crime, with Andres emerging as the primary suspect. However, the investigation progressed slowly due to a lack of concrete evidence. Concerned that each passing day without answers diminished their chances of uncovering the truth, Javiera's family and friends initiated their own investigation. They spoke with people familiar with Andres, examined his background, and searched for any links to criminal activity. Soon, they discovered evidence connecting him to illegal operations. Through shared contacts, they found individuals who claimed Andres had participated in stealing copper from trains and was allegedly part of a group that extracted and sold metals on the black market. Furthermore, accounts of his aggressive behavior emerged. Those who knew him described him as having a short temper and a tendency to get into conflicts, often involving physical fights, and an inability to tolerate being contradicted. These details increased the family's concerns. If Andres had a history of aggression, he was certainly capable of committing a serious crime, particularly in a moment of rage. Javier's friends recalled that she had confided in them about Andres becoming increasingly controlling and obsessive. They found old messages where she expressed worry that he was tracking her, calling her several times a day, and demanding to know her whereabouts. While her loved ones continued to search for answers, the police conducted a forensic examination of Andres's car. Since he was the last person known to see Javier alive, his truck could contain important evidence. Inside the truck, investigators discovered traces of blood. Initial analysis showed stains on the passenger seat and the interior of the door. They also found fibers that seemed to match the clothing Javier was wearing. The blood samples were sent for DNA testing. A few days later, the results confirmed the worst fears: the blood belonged to Javiera Jimenez. This revelation completely undermined Andres's claim that he had simply dropped her off on the highway. If she had left his truck voluntarily, why was her blood found inside? And if she had been injured, why didn't he report it? Police obtained GPS data from Andres' vehicle, which revealed that on the night Javier disappeared, he was driving towards Calama. However, instead of taking the main road, he opted for a side road that led into the desert. His car remained in that isolated area for a long time before it continued on its way. This discovery became a significant turning point in the case, leading investigators to suspect that a crime may have taken place there or that evidence was concealed. When Andres learned that the police had received forensic results, he understood that his arrest was imminent. His behavior changed. He ceased communication with everyone, including those he previously trusted. The day before he was scheduled to be questioned by police, he suddenly packed a bag and left his apartment. Surveillance cameras recorded him exiting the building with a small backpack and getting into a car. Neighbors later confirmed that he left in a hurry and did not return. Authorities quickly issued an arrest warrant for him, but by that point, he was already gone. Further investigation showed that Andres had used false documents to cross the border, making him a fugitive. His name was added to an international criminal database, but he managed to evade capture. For Javier's family, the only option was to continue seeking justice and waiting. They believed strongly that he would eventually slip up again. When he did, they were confident that the law would catch up with him. Law enforcement's initial efforts to catch Andres were unsuccessful. They found his abandoned car on the outskirts of Antofagasta, but he was missing, indicating he had carefully planned his escape. Phone records revealed that, just hours before disappearing, he had contacted several people already under investigation for criminal activities, suggesting he used these connections to vanish. Eventually, investigators confirmed that Andres had illegally fled Chile into Bolivia. He avoided official crossings by using lesser-known smuggling routes favored by traffickers. After crossing the border, he adopted a new identity. For months, he successfully evaded capture, fully aware that authorities were searching for him. Despite the challenges in the investigation, Javier's family refused to lose hope. Gladys tirelessly worked to keep the case in the public eye, ensuring that Andres appeared on international wanted lists. The family engaged with the media, raised awareness on social networks, and distributed flyers with his photo, hoping that someone would recognize him and notify the authorities. The turning point in the investigation came when a reward was offered for information that would lead to Andres's capture. The family pledged a generous sum to anyone who could provide credible information about his location. This approach proved effective, as tips began to emerge. By late 2023, reports indicated that Andres had been seen in a Bolivian city, living a secluded life and avoiding attention while keeping limited contact with locals. Bolivian authorities started monitoring his movements. They learned, through informants, that he was using a false identity, taking odd jobs, and avoiding any official documents that might reveal who he really was. However, he could not remain hidden forever. In January 2024, a local resident reported his exact location to the police. Authorities responded quickly, initiating a targeted operation to capture him. They surrounded the building where Andres was hiding. The operation was quick and efficient. He complied with their commands and was apprehended without resistance. During his arrest, he remained calm, seemingly resigned to his situation. This time, there was no way to escape. Andres was officially in custody and would soon face justice in Chile. After confirming his arrest, Bolivian authorities began the process of extraditing Andres back to Chile. Within days, he was returned to face trial, allowing Javier's family to see the person responsible for their daughter's death held accountable. However, this was just the start of a long battle for them, as they were determined to push for the harshest possible sentence. Once in Chile, Andres was placed in a detention facility, marking a new phase in the investigation. With the main suspect in custody, authorities had a chance to uncover the answers they had sought for over a year and a half. Initially, he refused to cooperate, denying any involvement in Javier's disappearance. However, investigators were ready, armed with evidence linking him to the crime. As the pressure increased, he eventually admitted. His confession lacked any sign of remorse or justification, delivered as if stating a simple fact. He neither portrayed himself as a victim nor showed any regret, maintaining a disturbingly calm demeanor as he spoke. The information he provided directly contradicted his earlier statements. He confessed that he hadn't originally intended to harm Javier, but after she refused to reconcile and ended their relationship for good, he made a choice he never planned to take back. He tricked her by claiming he had found her lost dog. Trusting him and unaware of what was about to happen, she agreed to meet him. He stated that the crime occurred late at night on a deserted highway. He stopped under the false pretense of looking for a missed suitcase that he claimed had fallen from the trunk. When Javier got out of the truck, he struck her with a fatal blow. Afterwards, he drove further into the desert, dug a shallow grave, and buried her body, thinking that the harsh environment would eliminate all evidence. The day after his confession, investigators began searching for the burial site using the coordinates given by Andres. In mid-January 2024, they found human remains in a shallow grave covered with sand. Now, forensic specialists begin the identification process. A few days later, forensic tests confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Javiera Jimenez. Although the search had ended, the fight for justice was just beginning. His family urged the court to impose the harshest sentence possible on Andres. After his confession, the case was brought to court. There was no doubt about his guilt. His own words, along with the evidence and the discovery of Javier's body, made that clear. It was now the court's responsibility to decide his punishment. Javier's family insists on the harshest penalty, life in prison without parole. They were convinced that he posed a threat to society. For Javiera's mother, true justice guaranteed Andres will never have the chance to re-offend. The prosecution presented all relevant evidence in court, with experts confirming that the crime was premeditated. They highlighted the misleading invitation, the choice to take her to a remote area, and the complete absence of any effort to help her, all of which indicated a well-planned act. Forensic specialists documented injuries that disproved any claims of accidental harm. Nevertheless, the defense sought a lighter sentence, arguing that their client had confessed, volunteered, and aided in locating the remains, which they claimed to have cooperated with the investigation. They requested leniency based on this argument, which angered Javier's family. They believed it was clear that Andres' confession was not out of remorse. He only admitted the truth when he had no other choice. He felt no guilt and was merely trying to lessen his sentence. The trial lasted several weeks, during which Gladys participated every session, watching everything unfold. Although she remains composed, her determination was evident in her eyes. Furthermore, in a similar fashion to the disappearance of Javiera Jimenez in August 2022, Andres is also being investigated for being a member of a violent armed gang that steals copper while it is being transported on FCAB trains. Similar crimes were committed by other members of the gang, and the prosecution was able to establish Andres Sutter's involvement through photographs, text messages, and statements from other criminals. In both cases, the court set different investigation dates. For the murder, he was sentenced to 90 days, and for the armed robbery and the copper cathode theft, he was sentenced to 60 days. In addition, Andres remains in custody awaiting trial.
Mysterious disappearances often attract a lot of public and media attention. In many cases, there are no clear explanations or theories, and speculation continues without confirmation. Investigations can remain open for many years, sometimes even decades. A notable and unsettling case involves the disappearance of a young French woman named Roxane Benest and a man of Moroccan descent, Nabil Tourougui, who had just met her. They had arranged what appeared to be an ordinary date, but neither of them came back. Their sudden disappearance captured widespread attention throughout Europe. Let's examine the details we know about this perplexing case. Nabil Tourougui was born in 1999 in Nouvelle-Aquitaine, France. He was the second of 5 siblings, the only son in a modest middle-class family. His parents and younger sisters still live in the same hometown. From a young age, Nabil showed exceptional intelligence, seriousness, and determination. He excelled in school, particularly in math and science. He aspired to earn a college degree, moved to Europe for better opportunities. Nabil possessed qualities that indicated he was destined for success. He had a close, loving relationship with his parents and sisters, supporting each other unconditionally, sharing everything without secrets. Those who knew Nabil described him as polite, calm, and genuinely kind, always willing to help others. He was also recognized for his humility and shyness. After finishing high school, he began looking for ways to move to Europe for further education. His older sister had relocated to Belgium 2 years earlier, where she enrolled in a university and later got married. She and her husband settled in Blankenberg, a coastal town in West Flanders. At 19, Nabil decided to move to France, specifically to Biarritz, a seaside resort on the Basque coast at Cape Saint Martin. The town has a population of about 25,000. It was once a retreat for royalty and aristocrats seeking relaxation. Today, it is popular with surfers from around the globe. However, Nabil's move to Biarritz was not for leisure. He was accepted into a respected engineering school. where he quickly gained a reputation as a talented student. In 2021, he graduated and soon received an attractive job offer from a major corporation. The flexible work schedule was ideal for him. Nabil adapted well to life in France and formed a broad circle of friends. He remained closely connected to his family, regularly communicating with his parents and sisters, and making annual visits home for holidays. He frequently visited his older sister, providing her support in various ways, and even became the godfather of her child. Roxane Benest was born in 2001 in Saint-Laurent-de-Siré, Charente. She grew up in a modest, middle-income family as the middle child of 3 siblings, with an older sister and a younger brother. Her parents prioritized their children's education and worked hard to help them build a bright future. Although Roxane wasn't the top student in school, she was known for her big heart and her desire to help others. Her friends described her as kind, generous, and hardworking. Roxane had a natural talent for connecting with people and enjoyed activities like reading, drawing, and photography. After graduating from high school, she moved to the beautiful town of Biarritz and started taking nursing assistant courses. Shortly after, she began working as a caregiver in a nursing home. Her colleagues and the residents consistently praised her compassion, kindness, and sense of responsibility. She treated everyone with warmth, understanding, initially or to help with rent costs after relocating to a new city. Roxane shared an apartment with 2 friends. However, once she secured steady employment and earned a reliable income, she moved into her own place in a quiet residential complex on the edge of town. Roxane maintained a close relationship with her parents, sister, and brother, which is why she made it a priority to return home for family gatherings on weekends whenever possible. Roxane worked long hours and frequently felt tired. Her hectic schedule left her with little time to socialize beyond her co-workers and the people she cared for at work. However, she never voiced her frustrations. Roxane believed that things would improve in due time. To stay connected with friends, she maintained several social media profiles where she shared her interests. In January 2022, she met Nabil on one of these platforms. Nabil had been working hard and hadn't had much time for relationships. He rarely used social media, never thought of it as a way to meet someone special until he saw Roxane's profile. Her warm smile and kind energy instantly attracted him, prompting him to send her a message. Roxane accepted his friend request, soon found herself enjoying their connection. At first, when their conversations were casual, fun, but they quickly realized they had a lot in common, including shared interests in similar outlooks on life. Talking became a daily habit for them. They exchanged phone numbers and started having regular conversations, sometimes lasting for hours. Neither of them had any particular goals. They were just enjoying each other's company. They chose to take their time and really get to know one another instead of rushing into anything. During a visit with his older sister, Nabil mentioned that he had met someone who felt like a kindred spirit. He didn't provide details but promised to share more later. Meanwhile, Roxane told her sister about her new friend, describing Nabil as kind, thoughtful, and intelligent. Their busy work schedules made it hard to meet in person, even though they lived only a few dozen miles apart. Eventually, their days off matched up, and they decided to meet at a cozy cafe. Coincidentally, the date was February 14th of Valentine's Day. Neither intended for it to happen on that day, but they both saw it as a positive sign. Nabil and Roxane had a fantastic time together, discussing their past experiences and future aspirations. They shared laughter and stories, genuinely enjoying their time with one another. Neither of them was let down. Instead, they both sensed a real connection that could develop into a significant relationship. They even took a photo together that day and shared it on their social media profiles, tagging each other. This photo would later receive a lot of attention from the media when their names appeared in headlines, not just in France but throughout Europe. In the picture, they looked happy and relaxed. They had no idea that they had less than a week left to enjoy their current lives. Shortly after their first meeting, the two began planning a second date, which was set for Friday, February 18th, 2022. Both were eager and wanted to make it a memorable evening in a romantic setting. Roxane chose to keep her new relationship private for now. None of her co-workers or close friends knew she was dating someone. She only shared her feelings with her sister, telling her that she might be falling in love as she prepared for the upcoming second date with the guy she met online. Nabil sent a message to his older sister, telling her he had a date planned for that evening. He didn't provide any details about the girl or her name, but he hinted that he hoped to introduce her to the family soon. That Friday was a lovely sunny day, lasting until sunset. Roxane and Nabil was seen strolling along the boardwalk, where Roxane took some photos of the scenery and shared them on her social media. Later, they were seen at a cafe, sitting together, chatting, and laughing. Witnesses noted that they appeared relaxed and happy. Not long after, they disappeared without a trace. Nabil's close friend was the first to notice something was wrong. Nabil had promised to visit him at 10 p.m. that night to help him with an engineering project for his final thesis. Nabil said he would come after dropping off his date, but he never arrived neither that night nor the next morning. He wasn't replying to messages, and calls went straight to voicemail, indicating his phone was likely turned off. This behavior was completely out of character for Nabil, who was known for being reliable and keeping his promises. If something unexpected had happened, he would have communicated it to someone. Concerned, Nabil's friend reached out to Nabil's sister. She quickly informed their parents and alerted the local authorities. On February 19th, Roxane was supposed to work her shift, but she never arrived, which was unusual for her as she was a reliable employee who had never been late before. Her phone went unanswered, and her messages on all platforms were also ignored. That same day, Roxane's co-workers reached out to her parents to inform them that she was missing. Her family immediately went to Biarritz. Roxane's older sister had a spare key to her rental apartment, but when they arrived, the apartment was empty. All of Roxane's belongings were still there, and there were no signs of a struggle or that she had packed in a hurry. No one had heard from Roxane since the previous evening, and her friends and colleagues had not seen or spoken to her during that time. All they knew was that she had gone on a date with a guy she met online. Concerned, her parents quickly filed a missing person report with the local police. Initially, reports for both Roxane and Nabil were handled separately because no one could confirm who they had gone out with. However, both families later mentioned that the authorities seemed to lack urgency in addressing the cases, even stating that both individuals were adults who had the right to privacy and weren't required to keep their families informed about their whereabouts. Due to the lack of urgency from authorities, both families decided to take matters into their own hands and started organizing searches through social media. Roxane's sister discovered the name of the man Roxane was supposed to meet and found his social media profile. There, she came across a post from his family indicating that he was also missing and had not been heard from since Friday. Simultaneously, Nabil's sister found Roxane's profile and saw pictures of them together. On Sunday, February 20th, the families of Roxane and Nabil finally connected. Initially, there was tension and distrust between them. Roxane's family feared that Nabil might have harmed their daughter, while Nabil's family worried that Roxane might have influenced their shy son negatively. However, they soon recognized that they were facing the same tragic situation and began working together to search. The families worked hard to find anyone who might have information about Roxane and Nabil's location. They created social media groups to share photos of Roxane and Nabil, asking the public for tips that could assist in the investigation. Friends and colleagues of both individuals joined in, printing flyers, distributing them throughout the community. The flyers included important details to identify them. Roxane had several distinctive tattoos, and Nabil had a noticeable birthmark. Additionally, both of their cars were missing. Nabil drove a silver Renault Clio 3, and Roxane recently purchased a blue Peugeot. The families also organized searches for the vehicles on their own, but those efforts did not yield any results. The police launched a full search on Monday morning, more than 48 hours after Roxane and Nabil were last seen. The delay was based on the belief that they might have taken an unplanned weekend trip without telling anyone. However, as time passed and their phones stayed off, it became apparent that something was seriously wrong. Sadly, this meant that crucial time had already been wasted. Investigators confirmed that Roxane and Nabil was last seen together at a fast food restaurant, with several eyewitnesses and surveillance footage confirming their presence. However, their cars were not located in the nearby parking lot. Since that area tends to be very busy on Friday nights, they may have parked farther away due to a lack of available spaces. The theory was quickly backed up by new evidence. Roxane's car was found parked in a small side street nearby, and everything inside seemed untouched. There were no signs of struggle, no stains, and nothing appeared out of order. This led investigators to believe that they may have chosen to continue their night elsewhere and left in Nabil's car. However, their destination remained unclear. 2 days later, Nabil's car was discovered parked near the Biarritz Lighthouse, a popular tourist spot on a cliff. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in that area, making it impossible to know what time Roxane and Nabil arrived. The only camera located at the lighthouse had stopped working weeks before, leaving no recorded footage. Investigators found several personal items belonging to both Roxane and Nabil inside Nabil's car. Roxane's phone was mounted on the dashboard in GPS mode. Although it was fully charged, it hadn't been used after a certain point, which helped authorities trace the couple's exact movements. In the back seat, there was Nabil's laptop, and on the passenger seat, Roxane's purse with her keys, cash, and bank cards. It seemed as though they had only stepped out for a moment, planning to come back soon. There were no signs of foul play in the car, only their fingerprints were present, and everything appeared undisturbed. Investigators quickly ruled out robbery or any targeted attack. The only item missing was Roxane's camera, which she likely took with her to capture photos that evening. Her phone eventually died, while Nabil's last phone signal was recorded around 6:30 p.m. from a location near the Virgin Rock viewpoint on the way to the lighthouse, which offers stunning views of the Atlantic Ocean. This route features several lookout terraces built into the cliffside. Although the day started off clear, strong winds developed into a severe storm by evening. The rough weather along the coast became particularly dangerous, with violent waves crashing against the cliffs. Peak storm conditions aligned with the last recorded activity from Nabil's phone, indicating Roxane and Nabil was at the lighthouse at that time. Based on the evidence gathered, investigators pieced together the following scenario. After dining at a restaurant, Roxane and Nabil chose to visit a lighthouse to watch the sunset. Roxane, an avid photographer, brought her camera to capture the beautiful scenery. While they were at one of the lookout points, the weather suddenly turned severe. As they attempted to return to their car, they were hit by large waves that lashed against the cliffs, possibly sweeping them away. Most evidence supported this version of events, leading law enforcement to initially determine that there was no foul play involved and consider closing the case. They even suggested a theory that Roxane and Nabil may have chosen to end their lives together, which would allow them to avoid extensive investigations and simply archive the case materials. However, Roxane and Nabil's families strongly rejected this conclusion. They insisted that the investigation remain active. As no bodies had been found, there was still hope that Roxane and Nabil might be alive and in need of assistance. Roxane's sister discovered a notebook in her apartment that had passwords for her social media accounts. After accessing the accounts and looking through her recent messages, nothing concerning or unusual was found. It was clear that Roxane had been primarily communicating with Nabil. Their relationship appeared to be loving and respectful, with both expressing enthusiasm about their time together. They carefully planned their dates and demonstrated real concern for each other. There were no signs that either of them had contemplated ending their lives. Law enforcement stated that all options were still being explored until Nabil and Roxane were located, whether alive or deceased. One theory proposed that Roxane and Nabil may have decided to go into hiding voluntarily, but both families strongly opposed this notion. Since they went missing, neither Nabil nor Roxane has used their bank cards, checked their emails, logged into social media, or turned on any electronic devices. Nabil's family, who lived in an area known for safety issues, feared that Roxane and Nabil might have been abducted. To assist in the search for their son, Nabil's parents decided to hire a private investigator. They feared that someone might be holding Nabil and his friend captive while awaiting ransom demands. Unfortunately, they never received any communication indicating that was the case. Meanwhile, Roxane's family leaned more toward the official theory that Roxane and Nabil had been caught in a tragic accident. There had been previous incidents at the same cliff near the lighthouse where tourists were swept away by rough waves. Still, Roxane's relatives insisted that the couple couldn't be declared deceased until their remains were recovered. Due to the ongoing storm, search efforts at sea were limited to helicopters and drones, as it was too dangerous to send in boats or divers. By the time the weather calmed down, too much time had passed, and no trace of there could be found. Over 3 years have passed since Roxane and Nabil disappeared, and the case is still open. Initially, the search focused on nearby towns, but it has now expanded to include neighboring European countries where remains could potentially be found under certain conditions. While the search began with physical descriptions, both families later provided DNA samples to help identify any unidentified remains that might be discovered. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, no trace of Nabil or Roxane has been found. Both families have often voiced their frustration with what they see as the police's slow response. Right from the beginning, investigators seemed to believe that Roxane and Nabil had drowned and did not explore other possibilities, which led the relatives to take action themselves. Months later, it was found that a small hotel near the lighthouse had a surveillance camera that recorded part of the path to the lookout point. That footage could have revealed whether Nabil and Roxane went that way. Sadly, no one requested the recordings, and they were automatically deleted after 30 days. The most troubling aspect is that, even after all this time, neither Roxane and Nabil's bodies nor their belongings, including Roxane's camera, have been located. For many years, the families have contacted agencies in Spain, the UK, and other countries to ask about any unidentified remains. Nabil's family still holds on to hope that he might be alive but unable to contact anyone because he is being held somewhere. Both families are still pushing for the case to remain open. They are sharing their story through various media outlets, bloggers, and influencers, hoping someone will eventually provide information about what happened to Roxane and Nabil on February 18th, 2022. On Valentine's Day in Tijuana, Elizabeth was excited about a second date with a man she had recently met. As usual, she let her family know where she was going, even shared her location for safety. Initially, everything seemed fine. However, her messages suddenly stopped. Her phone went quiet, and her car was missing. By the next morning, her family began searching everywhere for her, hoping to find any clue. What they uncovered shattered their hearts and revealed a more disturbing situation in the city. Elizabeth was not alone. Her case was just the start of a troubling pattern. Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa was born in 1996 in Tijuana, Baja California, a city on the border between Mexico and the United States. She was the youngest of 7 siblings. People who knew her described Elizabeth as a cheerful and gentle young woman who had a strong bond with her mother. Her mother was more than just a mother to her. She was her anchor, confidant, and main source of strength. By early 2022, Elizabeth accomplished something her family had never achieved before. She graduated with a degree in international trade and business from a private university. This was a significant milestone, but it didn't satisfy her ambitions. She aspired to pursue a master's degree to create more opportunities for herself and her family. While planning her educational journey, Elizabeth also managed a small clothing business. To boost her income, she worked as a dancer in a bar located in Zona Norte, a popular nightlife area for both tourists and locals. Like many women in her situation, Elizabeth was careful. She kept her family updated, especially when meeting clients. She shared her location, maintained communication, and trusted her instincts. This cautious habit would later play a crucial role in the effort to track her last movements. On February 14, 2022, Valentine's Day, Elizabeth seemed excited. She had lunch with her mother that afternoon, which turned out to be their last meal together. Later that evening, she had a second date with a man she had recently met at work. He was American. Elizabeth confided in her brother, expressing that while she was uncertain about him, her curiosity led her to give him another chance. Staying true to her usual habits, she promised to keep in touch, send updates, and share her location. Some reports indicate they met again at a bar, while others suggest she picked him up near a border crossing in her white SUV. They went to a Brazilian restaurant for dinner and then drove to a motel close to the beaches of Tijuana. Elizabeth informed her family that she would be gone for no more than 4 hours. At the start of the night, everything appeared normal. She kept sending her location, and her messages reassured her family about her safety. They knew where she was and who she was with. However, then the updates suddenly stopped. There were no more messages, no answered calls, and no signs that she was moving. This silence was not just worrisome, it was overwhelming. Her family's anxiety grew rapidly. The lack of communication was completely out of character for someone as careful and responsible as Elizabeth. It quickly became a clear sign that something was seriously wrong. As the hours went by, the feeling of dread intensified, marking the onset of a nightmare that no one was ready to face. When hours went by without any news of Elizabeth, her family didn't hesitate to take action. That same night, filled with fear and uncertainty, they started searching for her on their own. Their first stop was the bar where she worked, but the response they received was shocking. Elizabeth had not come in that day. Her concerned co-workers provided the family with an important lead, a detailed description of the man she was supposed to meet. They described him as overweight, with light brown skin and visible acne scars. He was a frequent customer at the bar, and although he didn't have a name, the description was detailed enough to help the family in their search. By February 15th, the family was increasingly worried due to the lack of news about Elizabeth. They decided to report her disappearance to local authorities, but encountered a common hurdle: bureaucracy. They were informed that they had to wait 24 hours before they could file an official report. Determined not to delay, they took to social media, creating pages, sharing photos, and soliciting the public's help. Despite their efforts, it felt as though Elizabeth and her white Jeep Liberty had completely disappeared. On February 16th, authorities officially expanded the report to include her missing vehicle. GPS tracking of Elizabeth's phone showed her movements, first to a Brazilian restaurant near the river, then to a motel, and finally to a park. The last recorded location was a downtown hotel in Tijuana. Her brother hurried there, but hotel staff denied him entry, and there was still no sign of Elizabeth or her Jeep. On Thursday, February 17th, her family used the vehicle's GPS history to track it to a street in Zona Norte. A sense of dread settled over them. Something was definitely wrong. Elizabeth's mother and brother drove directly to the location. Although the Jeep was there, Elizabeth was not. They called the police, and officers and firefighters arrived within minutes to secure the area. Their attention quickly turned to the trunk of the vehicle. What they discovered confirmed the worst fears of Elizabeth's family. Her lifeless body was inside, naked and curled up in a fetal position, exhibiting clear signs of violence. The heartbreaking scene devastated her family, leaving them in shock and disbelief. Elizabeth's family spoke out about her murder, the silence and inaction that preceded it. They highlighted a system that failed to respond when she went missing and the long wait for justice. The story quickly gained attention and sparked outrage throughout the city. Friends, co-workers, even strangers gathered at the scene. Elizabeth's body was taken to the forensic medical service for a complete autopsy. The findings were troubling. She had multiple blunt force injuries on her face, chest, and abdomen. A deep mark on her neck indicated an attempted strangulation. Additionally, there were signs of asphyxiation due to blockage of both her mouth and nose. Forensic experts determined that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death. The investigation did not provide any information on possible abuse assault. Nonetheless, the case is officially categorized as a femicide, and an investigation is underway to find her murderer. The tragedy continued for the family after Elizabeth's passing. Just 3 days later, her mother suffered a sudden heart attack and died. Although the official cause was cardiac failure, many believed it was due to overwhelming grief that her body could not bear. As the family laid both mother and daughter to rest, the investigation picked up speed. Local and state authorities began to connect Elizabeth's case with others in the area. A frightening realization surfaced. This was not an isolated incident. The method of killing shared unsettling similarities with 2 other cases of young women who also worked in nightlife scene in Zona Norte. Karen, a 28-year-old mother from Veracruz, went missing on August 30th, 2021 after meeting a man at a motel. 3 days later, her body was discovered in a local garbage dump, showing obvious signs of violence. Karen had recently started working as a dancer and escort. She was careful about her safety, only meeting clients through direct phone calls. Before she left that day, she informed both a friend and a relative about her plans. Despite their quick efforts to find her, the situation ended in tragedy. Security cameras recorded the vehicle used by the man she met, and a friend later identified him from the video. However, surprisingly, no arrest warrant was issued, and the man remained at large. Angela Carolina Acosta Flores was only 20 years old when she was found dead in a hotel room on January 24, 2022, near the bar where Elizabeth worked. Like Elizabeth and Karen, Angela had gone to meet a man described as American and possibly of Hispanic descent. Her phone was missing from the crime scene, and when investigators traced it, they found it had been taken to Riverside, California, across the border. This discovery alarmed the investigators. 3 women had been brutally murdered, all linked by time, location, and method. Each case involved a mysterious man, likely American, and all 3 women were associated with the nightlife in the same area. They were killed within a 6-month period, leading to a troubling conclusion. There may be a serial killer targeting vulnerable women in Zona Norte. On Wednesday, November 16, 2022, the Baja California State Prosecutor held a highly anticipated press conference. With a room full of reporters and the nation watching, he confirmed a troubling presence. A serial killer was active in Tijuana. The prosecutor revealed that the suspect specifically targeted exotic dancers and escort who belonged to one of the city's most at-risk groups. His method was alarming. He would travel from the United States into Mexico, commit his crimes, and then escape back across the border, making it difficult for authorities to catch him. At that time, no additional details were shared to avoid compromising the investigation or alerting the suspect. Meanwhile, the manhunt for the killer was intensifying. Nearly a month later, on December 13th, the prosecutor held a second press conference. This time, the news was shocking. They had identified a suspect, an American citizen, whose psychological profile resembled that of Ted Bundy, one of the most notorious serial killers from the 1970s. However, there was a complication. The man had already left Mexico. Although a local arrest warrant was issued, it wasn't sufficient. Authorities sought a red notice from Interpol to enhance international cooperation. The FBI and U.S. consulates joined the search, and the suspect's physical description was made public to help locate him. Experts also conducted new forensic tests to ensure that no accomplices were missed. The breakthrough in the investigation came from detailed profiling. Investigators identified the man's methods. He targeted young women who were petite, attractive, and vulnerable. He portrayed himself as polite, respectful, and generous to gain their trust and lower their defenses. Once he had their confidence, he would lure them to secluded areas where he would then attack them. Each of the 3 known victims, Elizabeth Martinez, Karen, and Angela Carolina Acosta Flores, suffered extreme violence, with visible injuries primarily to their faces and chests. His method of asphyxiation was a defining characteristic. 2 of the victims were found without clothes, while the third, although still dressed, had more injuries, indicating she may have fought back. This was not a crime of passion. It was deliberate, predatory, and systematic. Although these 3 cases gained media attention, they were not isolated. At the time of Elizabeth's disappearance, there were already rumors about other missing women with similar ages, professions, and unfortunate outcomes. Their stories have quietly faded away without resolution. As the investigation progressed, authorities were under pressure to act quickly. Although the suspect's identity remained confidential, local media labeled him as the Ted Bundy of Tijuana. His actual name was Bryant Rivera, a U.S. citizen with several known addresses in Southern California. Authorities searched these locations, but he was nowhere to be found. Family members described Bryant as working in e-commerce. Meanwhile, the Elizabeth's family was actively seeking justice for her. On February 14, 2023, marking 1 year since her murder, They revisited the site where her body was discovered and placed a floral tribute in the shape of a heart. Her brother spoke to reporters, expressing his deep sorrow and anger. A year had passed, and Bryant remained at large. The family's lawyer had been denied access to the case details, and the prosecutor's office had not provided any updates. Additionally, Elizabeth's Jeep Liberty, which was part of the crime scene, had yet to be returned. On July 6, 2023, Bryant was arrested in Los Angeles. The arrest took place calmly at his parents' home. However, he was only charged with the murder of Angela Carolina. While the murders of Karen and Elizabeth were not included in the UP's charges, even though Mexico had made an active extradition request for all three cases. The Baja California prosecutor publicly confirmed Bryant's arrest, stating it was a result of collaboration between local and federal law enforcement agencies in the U.S. Bryant was assigned a public defender and requested bail. The judge denied the bail request, citing concerns about Bryant being a flight risk and a potential danger to women. He was ordered to remain in custody at Los Angeles County Jail. His family firmly rejected all allegations against him. His mother claimed he could never commit such acts of violence, and his sister even wrote a letter to support his character. However, the evidence suggested otherwise. On June 29, 2023, a federal judge in Los Angeles approved Mexico's request to extradite him. Family members of Angela were present at the hearing, along with the brother of Elizabeth. The courtroom was heavy with the sorrow of three grieving families. The judge emphasized that Bryant would remain in custody. As of June 2025, the extradition process is still ongoing. Legal experts estimate it could take up to 2 years to complete. If convicted of all three murders, Bryant could potentially face a total of 180 years in prison. However, due to Mexican law, the maximum sentence he could actually serve is 50 years. In addition, Mexican prosecutors have suggested that Bryant might be connected to a fourth victim, prompting them to investigate unsolved cases of missing women. Investigators are also re-examining surveillance footage from hotels and motels to determine if this predator has been active for a longer period than initially suspected. The situation surrounding Elizabeth has evolved from a personal tragedy to a representation of a larger national issue. Her death, along with the deaths of Karen and Angela, underscores the serious stigma and disregard that women in the escort industry encounter. When Elizabeth went missing, authorities did not intervene. Instead, it was her family who located her. It was her online activity, rather than official procedures, that ultimately pointed to her killer. Even now, despite an arrest, justice has not been achieved. The murder of Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa is a heartbreaking reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by women in Tijuana's nightlife and the devastating consequences of a system that too often fails them. Her vibrant spirit, her dreams of a brighter future, and her deep bond with her family were cruelly extinguished, leaving a void that echoes through her community. The cases of Elizabeth, Karen, and Angela reveal a chilling pattern of violence that demands urgent action. As Bryant Rivera's extradition process drags on, Elizabeth's family and countless others continue their relentless pursuit of justice, refusing to let her story fade into silence. This tragedy is not just a personal loss, but a rallying cry to confront the stigma, neglect, and impunity that perpetuate such crimes.
Mariana Jocelyn Baltira Valenzuela was born on November 24, 1998, in the city of Ixtapan de la Sal, located in the state of Mexico. She is the older sibling of 2 children from a modest family. Fate decreed that she had to fight for her life from her first days. She was born much earlier than expected, and doctors seriously feared that the child, with a critically low weight, would not survive, which they informed her parents, Syra and Orlando. Mariana spent the first 2 months of her life in a hospital, in a special ward for premature babies. Her mother prayed day and night for her daughter's health, and her prayers were answered. The girl quickly recovered and gained weight. By the new year of 1999, she was discharged home, allowing her parents to celebrate the holiday with their daughter. Fortunately, Mariana had no external consequences of prematurity. She grew up slim and beautiful, but her health was very poor from a very early age. When Mariana was 4 years old, a second child appeared in the family, a boy. Mariana adored her younger brother and helped her parents take care of him. From the earliest age, they were very close and practically inseparable. At the age of 6, Mariana was diagnosed with epilepsy, which required her to regularly take special medications to minimize the likelihood of seizures. The prescribed drugs and constant monitoring by specialists yielded good results, allowing her to lead a relatively ordinary life, not too different from her peers. Moreover, she treated her health responsibly, following the regimen and taking the necessary medications. Mariana studied well at school, drew beautifully, and loved music. She was a very kind, open, and sincere girl. Everyone who knew her personally spoke positively about her. However, she was also modest and shy, especially in her teenage years. She had only a couple of best friends, did not go on dates, did not attend parties, and hardly interacted with boys. Mariana preferred to spend time at home with her family, with whom she had very close and warm relationships. The fragile and petite girl looked much younger than her age. At 16, she seemed no older than 13. Kind-hearted and sympathetic, Mariana always tried to help homeless animals, which she fed, treated, looked after, and then handed over to safe hands. As a high school student, she finally decided to become a veterinarian and provide professional assistance to those in need. Her parents often said that their daughter was too naive and trusting. She didn't perceive evil or danger from other people, as she herself brought only light and kindness into the world. Therefore, her father and mother were always worried that Mariana could be offended or harmed by someone taking advantage of her innocence. The area where the Baltira family lived was relatively calm. Almost everyone who lived there knew each other by sight. However, along their street, there were a large number of shops where many migrant workers worked unofficially. Some of them lived right in the shops, as most did not have their own housing, and some could not even afford to rent a room. Naturally, among these workers were individuals with extensive criminal histories. But, as long as they performed their duties properly, the shop owners usually had no complaints about them. About 50 meters from the Baltira family home was a butcher shop. The shop owner hired 4 workers, 2 locals who sold goods, 2 immigrants unloading cargo, butchered carcasses, and cleaned the store. The shop owner allowed the workers to stay on the second floor of the shop, which was an attic. As Mariana grew older, her parents began to periodically ask her to go shopping for the family, including to the aforementioned butcher shop. There she repeatedly encountered one Cruz Quintero Martinez, a worker of the landlord who lived on the second floor. She felt fear of this man just by his presence. She repeatedly told her friends and her parents that there was something sinister in his gaze that made her blood run cold. At the same time, there was nothing specific she could blame on this man since he did not approach her or attempt to contact her in any way, but merely looked at her. So her parents decided not to let their daughter go to this store anymore and went shopping for the necessities themselves. At some point, Juan Martinez committed a minor theft, resulting in the store owner's decision to fire him. After that incident, they did not hear from him for about a year. However, in early summer 2017, he returned to his former workplace, tearfully begged his former employer to rehire him, assuring him that he would work diligently. Remarkably, he was rehired and moved back into the second floor of the store. Cyrus' niece was visiting the Baltiras while Mariana and her younger brother were on summer vacation, with Orlando being the only one at work. Around 9 a.m., Syra asked her daughter to go to the local supermarket to buy breakfast. She believed her daughter was old enough to handle such a task. Moreover, the street was well lit and crowded. In her opinion, nothing bad could happen. She gave her daughter some money and asked Mariana to buy milk, eggs, and vegetables. Mariana left the house dressed in an old t-shirt and pajama pants. The store was located less than a couple of hundred meters from their house, so the round trip to get there, buy the necessary items, and return should not have taken more than half an hour. However, when an hour passed and Mariana still had not returned, her mother grew concerned, especially since Mariana's phone was left at home. With her little niece in her arms, Syra went to look for her daughter. She walked down the street to the store and asked the cashiers if they had seen a young girl in glasses. They informed her that a girl fitting her description had bought groceries a quarter of an hour ago and had left the store. Panic began to set in. Syra realized that something terrible had happened. Syra returned home, asked her son to look after his niece, and then went out to the street, where she began asking neighbors, street vendors, and passers-by if they had seen her daughter. However, it seemed as if the girl had vanished without a trace. Syra immediately reported the incident to the police and called her husband, who rushed home from work to help find their daughter. By the time the police arrived at the scene, dozens of neighbors, as well as relatives and friends of the Baltira family, had already joined the search. They called all of Mariana's acquaintances, combed the streets, and posted printed leaflets with her photographs. Initially, law enforcement officials were not particularly concerned about the situation. They asked the parents whether their daughter could have gone on a date or visited someone. Syra and Orlando insisting that their daughter would never go anywhere without informing them, especially since she had gone to the store in her home clothes and with a grocery bag, knowing she was expected back home. There were surveillance cameras installed in the area where Mariana disappeared, but almost none of them were functional. The entire day of searching yielded no results, and not a single trace of the girl was found. As night fell, anxiety and panic turned into despair. The parents realized that they would likely never see Mariana alive again. The next day, July 28, at about 8 a.m., Mariana's parents received a call from a nearby relative, who informed them that several police cars had arrived at a butcher's shop. Without hesitation, the Baltira got ready and went to the indicated location. Law enforcement agencies did not allow them inside. But Syra and Orlando had no intention of leaving. Minutes after checking the scene, one of the police officers informed Orlando that the body of a young girl, identified as the missing Mariana, had been found on the second floor of the building, lifeless and badly mutilated. Orlando was invited inside to confirm her identity, but Syra was strongly advised against entering, as the crime scene was truly shocking. Orlando could not believe his eyes as he looked at the body lying in a puddle of blood, his daughter. His world collapsed in an instant, and he did not know how to tell his wife, who was waiting outside. Mariana had been repeatedly abused and brutally mutilated. The cause of death was massive blood loss due to a stab wound to the stomach. The perpetrator cut open her abdomen while she was still alive, leaving her to bleed to death. An expert opinion showed that her death occurred on the night of July 27th, just a few hours before the discovery of her body. Therefore, she was alive for almost 24 hours from the time of her disappearance, during which the criminal abused her until he fatally wounded her. The murder weapon, a knife intended for cutting up carcasses, was found on the floor next to her body. The body was discovered by the owner of the store when he arrived for work that morning. According to him, every last Thursday of the month was designated as cleaning day, during which he did not work. On that day, the owner was engaged in organizational matters, meetings with suppliers, and submitting reports to the tax office while his employees cleaned and disinfected the premises. When he arrived in the morning, he immediately noticed blood stains on the floor. Initially thinking that one of his employees living on the second floor had been injured, he was shocked to find bloody men's clothing, a knife, and the body of a young girl in a pool of blood. In addition, a large sum of money had gone missing from the cash register, which the criminal had evidently taken upon fleeing. Two men who lived and worked at the store immediately came under suspicion. However, one of them showed up for work an hour later, appearing just as shocked as everyone else. He explained that he had to return home to another city urgently, and his colleague, Juan, said Juan would cover for him and clean the store himself. The police concluded that this man was telling the truth, noting that there were no traces of him at the crime scene, and he was excluded from the list of suspects. By that time, CCTV footage from the supermarket, which Mariana had visited on the last day of her life, was obtained. The footage showed she entering the store, followed by one a few minutes later, the man who worked at the butcher's shop and had instilled genuine fear in Mariana. He stalked his victim like a wild animal hunting prey, following her out of the supermarket without purchasing anything. After that, both of their trails vanished. Reconstructing the sequence of events outside the store proved impossible. Although there were cameras on the street, they were non-functional, and none of the numerous passers-by or street sellers reported anything suspicious. Mariana's parents were convinced that their daughter would never have gone with this man, no matter how he might have lured her. They believed he had forcibly taken her to the store. However, they were left wondering why she did not scream or call for help, and why none of the many passers-by or street vendors noticed anything unusual about the situation. 27-year-old Juan Cruz Quintero Martinez was characterized as withdrawn and uncommunicative. Those who knew him said that he was a violent person with sadistic tendencies, which he displayed towards homeless animals. Previously, he had attracted the attention of the police for harassment and causing serious bodily harm. He got a job as a worker in a butcher's shop in early 2015. For a long time, according to the shop owner, there were no questions or complaints about him. Juan did his job conscientiously, but in mid-2016, he was caught stealing money and was subsequently fired. After losing his job, he returned to his parents' home, where his sick elderly mother and his sister, who took care of her, lived. For almost a year, Juan literally sat on their necks, stealing money, selling things from the house, abusing alcohol, and using illegal substances. In addition, he regularly beat his mother and sister. One day, tired of the constant bullying, his sister threatened to call the police if he did not leave the house. Juan, unwilling to deal with law enforcement again, obediently left. Since he had nowhere else to go, he asked his former employer to rehire him. The owner of the butcher shop agreed, providing him with a place to work and a roof over his head, allowing him to continue living on the second floor. It was mid-June 2017, just a month before the tragedy. Juan did his job conscientiously, but about a week later, he met Mariana, who had come of age and literally drove him crazy. She avoided him and never went to that store for shopping. Nevertheless, Juan began to follow her on the streets, discovering where she was going, what paths she was choosing. The second worker who lived with him also noticed his unhealthy interest in Mariana and even tried to joke about it, not suspecting that Juan would soon commit a crime. After Juan became the only suspect in the brutal abuse and murder of Mariana, all available resources were put into searching for him. Initially, law enforcement agencies went to his house, believing that relatives might help him escape. However, his sister insisted that he was not welcome there and that Juan knew his relatives would immediately hand him over to the police. She was not even surprised by the terrible crime her brother had committed. Moreover, she described how he had abused her elderly mother and even attacked the old woman with a knife, threatening to cut her open like a pig if he was not given money for illegal substances. The search for the killer was a priority for the police because Juan was extremely aggressive, violent, and dangerous to others. The money stolen from the cash register would have lasted him a long time, but no one knew how he would behave next or whether he would commit another crime after killing. Throughout the month, the search continued in the Ecatepec area and surrounding suburbs because the police believed that the criminal could not have gone far. However, time passed, and no trace of Juan was found. Soon, information about the abuse and brutal murder of Mariana reached national news, and police from across the state joined the search for the brutal criminal. Juan Martinez's photo appeared daily on television news, was printed on the front pages of newspapers, and was posted on streets all over the country with the note, "Ruthless Killer at Large." A large cash reward was announced for information about his whereabouts, as well as for assistance in his arrest, which was constantly increasing. But even this did not contribute to any progress in the case. The search for the criminal proved difficult, as he had not maintained contact with any relatives and had no friends. Additionally, Juan did not have social media pages and did not even use a mobile phone, let alone credit cards. After 6 months of unsuccessful search attempts, the reward for any information about him was increased to $500,000 Mexican pesos. Even this, however, did not help. Justice for the murder took over 2 years, finally arriving in August 2019 when her executioner was located and arrested. He was found in another state, almost 1,000 kilometers from the crime scene, when he was accidentally recognized on the street by a vigilant elderly woman. He constantly hid his face behind a hood and sunglasses, seemed suspicious to her, so she decided to report him to the police, not suspecting that he was one of Mexico's most wanted criminals. Juan was arrested right on one of the city streets, and to the surprise of law enforcement agencies, he did not even resist. He obediently held out his hands, allowing them to put handcuffs on him. The next day, after his identity was confirmed, the criminal was taken to the city of Ecatepec, where he had committed his crime. He was placed in custody in one of the city's prisons awaiting trial. In May 2022, 5 years after the tragedy, the killer and abuser was finally sentenced. Juan Martinez received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Additionally, he was ordered to pay 1 million Mexican pesos in compensation for moral damages to the family of Mariana. Mariana's parents and brother said the arrest of the killer was a huge relief to them as he would certainly not be able to harm other girls. However, even life imprisonment and a large monetary compensation cannot erase the pain from their hearts, as their beloved daughter and sister will not return. They will have to live with this for the rest of their days.
The morning of June 21st, 2016 was scorching, just like most summer days in Riverside County, California. A local motorcyclist was riding along a rural road near Lake Matthews when he pulled off the highway and noticed a motionless figure on the shoulder. A man was lying on his back. His face was partially disfigured, and his clothes were soaked in blood. The nature of the injuries pointed to a violent crime, several stab wounds followed by a shot to the head. There were no signs of a struggle at the scene, nor any indication that the crime had occurred there. Everything suggested that the body had been transported and dumped after the crime. Investigators later identified the victim as 25-year-old Justin Hilbert, a resident of Riverside. On the evening of June 20th, he left the home he shared with his partner, Tanya Rep, and never returned. Their son was just 6 months old at the time. Justin had recently finished a technical training program and had just started a new job. His life seemed to be turning around, but it came to an abrupt end. The investigation immediately hit roadblocks. Justin had no known enemies, no debts, and those close to him reported no ongoing conflicts. Tanya Rep was born in California in the mid-1980s. She grew up in a stable, working-class household, became independent early, from a young age. She demonstrated responsibility and strong ambition. She worked in logistics, was known for her organizational skills, reliability. In the 2000s, Tanya met Jared Bischoff. He appeared mature, dependable, and strong. Their relationship progressed quickly. They married not long after. However, their marriage began to crack under pressure. Tension and power struggles grew more frequent over time. Jared became increasingly controlling and aggressive. He displayed jealousy, exerted emotional pressure, eventually resorted to physical force. Tanya refused to accept that behavior. She began gathering evidence, preparing for a divorce. The process was long and painful. Jared refused to let go, resisted the separation. He tried to maintain influence over her at any cost. Jared served in the U.S. Marine Corps. After leaving the military, he returned to California and struggled to find stable work. He had a determined, persistent character. Outwardly, he seemed calm and dependable, but beneath that facade, there was volatility and a desire for control. He viewed the marriage not simply as a personal relationship, but as his territory, one he would not allow interference in. After the divorce, he couldn't accept that Tanya had moved on. He especially struggled when she began seeing another man. Though he claimed to have come to terms with it verbally, he continued to interfere. He showed up near her home, monitored her activities, applied pressure, and issued threats. He didn't see his behavior as stalking. In his mind, it was about restoring justice and trying to regain lost control. Justin Hilbert lived in Riverside, California. He was just beginning to build his adult life. After years of side gigs and searching, he enrolled in a technical school, graduated, and landed a full-time job maintaining industrial equipment. Justin was calm, avoided conflict. In early 2015, he met Tanya. At the time, she was finalizing the end of a difficult marriage. Their first conversations felt easy, natural. Justin didn't push, didn't rush things, and never made demands. He simply showed up, listened, offered support, and helped when needed. Over time, Tanya and Justin developed a strong bond. They didn't move in together immediately, but they started to spend more time as a couple. With Justin, Tanya felt a sense of safety she hadn't experienced in a long time. When she discovered she was pregnant, Justin responded with calm and support instead of fear. He became more engaged, helping to prepare for the baby. And by early 2016, they were living together. In January, their son was born. He quickly became the focal point of their lives. Justin embraced fatherhood, learning how to swaddle, bottle feed, care for him at night, and take him for walks. Although they weren't legally married, their family and friends saw them as a complete family unit. Justin's parents welcomed Tanya into their lives, and she often spent time with them. creating a warm home environment. Justin had no ties to Jared and was unaware of how deeply Jared was affected by the changes in Tanya's life. All Justin wanted was to create a stable, loving family together. Bailey Sharp, the youngest person in this story, was born in the early 1990s in Seattle to a family involved in law enforcement. As a child, she was energetic, enjoyed science and sports. However, her life took a turn during her teenage years when she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and lupus. The chronic pain and medical limitations significantly impacted her mental health. By the age of 16 or 17, she began using marijuana, progressed to prescription painkillers, and eventually sought out stronger drugs. Despite going through rehabilitation multiple times and experiencing periods of recovery, she faced ongoing relapses. By 2015, her social connections in Seattle had weakened, and her family relationships were strained, prompting her to move to California in search of a fresh start. In California, she struggled with unstable housing and unemployment. She would sometimes stay with acquaintances, frequent bars, and visit low-budget venues. It was at one of these places that she met Jared Bischoff, Tanya's ex-husband. Jared soon became a controlling figure in her life, using her vulnerability and dependence for his own gain, rather than seeking a romantic relationship. On June 20, 2016, the day in Riverside began like any other. Justin was spending time with Tanya and their 6-month-old son. They talked about Justin's early shifts at his new job and made plans for the week. Everything felt peaceful. In the afternoon, Tanya mentioned a strange conversation she had the night before. A woman named Bailey had sent her a message, alleging that Justin was being dishonest and living a double life. Tanya showed the messages to Justin, who read them carefully and firmly stated that they were false. He remained calm and suggested that someone was trying to create tension between them. Justin assured Tanya that he would find out who was behind the messages. He understood why she might doubt him and reassured her of his love and honesty. At around 9 p.m., Justin mentioned that he needed to step out for a little while. He didn't provide many details, but it was typical for him to briefly leave to grab tools, visit a friend, or get some fresh air. He prepared to go without any fuss, kissed his son, told Tanya he would be back soon, and left with his keys. Everything seemed normal at the time. However, hours went by and Justin did not return. Tanya tried texting him and then called, but there was no response. By midnight, his phone was turned off. Worry began to creep in. She stayed up, repeatedly checking messages and calling, hoping to hear from him, but there was silence. Justin had never spent the night away without informing her. At around 8 a.m. on June 21st, Tanya received a short text from Justin's number that simply said, "Don't wait, it's over." There was no greeting and no explanation. The message felt strange and uncharacteristic of Justin. Sensing that something serious had occurred, she quickly texted his mother and called his sister. Unfortunately, no one knew Justin's whereabouts. That morning, Riverside County authorities received a report about a man on a motorcycle who was riding down a rural road near Lake Matthews. He noticed a body lying face up, with clothes soaked in blood. There were no indications of a struggle. A medical examiner later confirmed that the victim died from a gunshot wound to the head, but there were also knife wounds that had occurred beforehand. All evidence pointed to the conclusion that the victim had been attacked elsewhere and then left in that location. The police identified the victim as Justin Hilbert. His earlier disappearance and a previous message now made a chilling connection. After discovering the body, investigators quickly began their work. The condition of the remains suggested that the crime likely occurred the previous night. Once they confirmed the victim's identity, officers visited the Justin home. Tanya stated that Justin left around 9 p.m. and had not returned since. The police recorded her statement and collected his possessions. They also noted that his dark blue sedan was missing and entered it into the National Database for Missing Vehicles. Upon examining Justin's clothing, they found that several personal items were absent. He usually carried his phone, work badge, and wallet, but none of these were found. It was evident that someone had intentionally tried to cover their tracks. Interviews with Justin's friends and colleagues provided minimal information. No one was aware of any problems or threats. Everyone characterized him as calm. There were no debts, lawsuits, or any clear motive. The case took a turn when investigators examined Tanya's recent messages. One name caught their attention: Bailey. She had reached out to Tanya just before Justin disappeared. A record search revealed Bailey Sharp, who is registered in San Bernardino County but does not have a permanent address. She is a young woman with a history of arrests related to banned substance. Bailey became the first major lead for investigators. There were no records of a job, insurance, lease, driver's license, or vehicle in her name. The only clue was the phone number she texted to Tanya. The police then examined the contacts associated with that number, identifying a man named Jared Bischoff, who is Tanya's ex-husband. There was no clear proof that Bailey and Jared were working together, but the circumstances were troubling. A woman with a questionable past suddenly contacting Tanya. That same phone number had also frequently reached out to Tanya's ex. Suspecting wrongdoing, investigators requested mobile device location data for the night of June 20th to 21st. Bailey's phone showed location pings in southern Riverside, near where Justin's body was eventually discovered. Investigators also examined Bailey's associates. Social workers reported spotting her with different men in parking lots and bars, but their identities were unknown. As a result, the investigators turned their attention to digital records. They found that the IP address used for Bailey's social media logins was the same as the one linked to Jared's account. This raised suspicions within the investigative team about a potential ongoing connection between Bailey and Jared, although the exact nature of their relationship was unclear. To avoid raising suspicions among potential suspects, the investigators chose to carry out surveillance quietly and continue collecting information. They began by confirming the locations of the suspects and checking if they were together. There was still no direct evidence. Investigators initially overlooked another possibility until they analyzed the messages exchanged between Tanya and Bailey. They became increasingly convinced that these texts were part of a deliberate setup meant to instigate doubt, jealousy, and resentment in Tanya. Bailey suggested that Justin was living a double life, cheating, and portrayed herself as the true victim. However, the messages lacked concrete evidence and details. One notable aspect was the overly polished language. The texts sounded scripted rather than expressing genuine personal distress. This led to a new consideration. Either someone else had composed the messages, or Bailey was not acting independently. Cell phone records indicated that while texting, Bailey was connected to a public Wi-Fi network at a bar in Murrieta. Investigators promptly secured the bar's surveillance footage. The video showed a woman who looked like Bailey sitting in a back corner and using her phone. Beside her was a man who sometimes leaned in to speak with her, pointed at her screen, and then walked away. The poor video quality made it difficult to identify the man. Later, investigators uncovered an important fact. The message Tanya received on the morning of June 21st from Justin's phone was not actually sent by him. By that time, Justin was already dead, and his phone was with Bailey Sharp. This revelation was unsettling. Bailey had intentionally sent that message to create a false assurance, preventing Tanya from panicking and making it appear as if Justin had left willingly. The goal was to calm her down and delay her from contacting the authorities, which was part of a calculated plan to postpone the discovery of the crime and evade law enforcement. The suspects made a critical error by not recognizing how easily digital activity can be tracked today. The way messages were structured, the entry points to their network, and the movements of phones all indicated a coordinated plan. Bailey's actions raised further suspicion. Just one day after Justin went missing, she turned off her phone and disappeared. This didn't seem like a reaction of panic. It appeared to be premeditated. Once the police started searching for Bailey Sharp, they struggled to locate her. Her phone was off, and she wasn't sending any messages. The only clue they had came from surveillance footage from a pharmacy in Paris on the evening of June 22nd, about 24 hours after Justin's body was discovered. Bailey was seen on camera alone, wearing a medical mask and a hooded sweatshirt, purchasing pain relievers and bottled water. She used an ID that belonged to someone else. The clerk couldn't remember details, but the cameras recorded everything. After that, she vanished once more. She was declared a wanted person, and local law enforcement agencies were notified. Her photo, aliases, descriptions, and known connections were added to the system. Investigators concluded that if she were merely a witness, she would not be hiding. Her disappearance turned her into a suspect, but there was no concrete evidence linking her to the crime, and no one had presented clear testimony against her. The case relied on circumstantial evidence, coincidences, strange messages, and her unexpected disappearance. Police observed a recurring pattern. In recent weeks, Bailey had been spotted multiple times in Riverside, near a secluded residential complex. Surveillance cameras captured images of her vehicle, followed by footage of another car. It seemed improbable that she could go into hiding on her own. Someone was likely providing her with shelter or accompanying her. A bigger question arose. If Bailey was just the bait, who was truly behind this entire situation? Who orchestrated it all? The answer started to become clear on the morning of June 24th, when the Department of Motor Vehicles provided some information. The second vehicle that was often seen near Bailey was registered to Jared Bischoff. This name had already been mentioned in the case files. Jared is the ex-husband of Tanya, who lives with Justin. Until that point, the police had no reason to link him directly to Justin's disappearance, but now his vehicle had been spotted near the location where the main suspect was hiding. Investigators started looking into Jared's history. He was a former Marine with several years of service and had worked in warehouses, sometimes in private security. Over the past year, he had not maintained a steady job. After divorcing Tanya, he briefly lived with relatives before moving out. Friends of Tanya mentioned that communication between her and Jared had ceased following numerous arguments, controlling behavior, and emotional strain. She felt he was a threat to her safety. After their breakup, Jared became difficult to track down. No one knew where he was living or who he was with. Until Bailey Sharp came into the picture, phone data showed that Bailey had been visiting Riverside regularly for several weeks before the incident. Surveillance footage from that area showed her with a man who closely resembled Jared. This was later confirmed by location data from both Bailey's and Jared's phones, which indicated they were in the same places at the same times. On the night Justin went missing, both phones registered signals from the same area in Riverside where Justin's body was eventually found. Police obtained a warrant to search an apartment believed to be occupied by Jared. Based on his mobile activity, the lease was under a false name. Inside, the place was disorganized, containing leftover food, Bailey's clothing, a backpack, and a knife wrapped in a t-shirt. The knife tested positive for blood, which forensics later identified as belonging to Justin Hilbert. However, Jared was not found at the scene. Neighbors reported seeing him shortly before the incident, sometimes alone and other times with a woman who looked like Bailey. Afterward, both disappeared. Authorities in Riverside County have issued warrants for both suspects. The search now includes banks, phone companies, and traffic cameras. Investigators returned to a bar in Murrieta where Bailey was frequently seen. A bartender remembered her distinctly. She had been there with a tall, quiet man. At the time, he didn't know the man's name, but when shown a photo of Jared, he recognized him right away. The bartender noted that they appeared to be very cautious. They talk about the impending disappearance of a woman. This indicated that the initial target might have been Tanya. Justin's presence became the catalyst for the conflict. Jared, using Bailey, set up a scheme where she sent Tanya false messages suggesting infidelity. This was intended to sow doubt, incite conflict, and potentially push Justin away. On the evening of June 20th, Justin left his home after receiving text from Bailey, who claimed she wanted to meet and reveal information about the situation. Unbeknownst to Justin, he was heading into a trap. A few days later, investigators found Justin's abandoned car on a secluded road, far from any houses or security cameras. Inside the vehicle, there were bloodstains on the seat, and outside, a partial fingerprint belonging to Danny Serrano, a man with a criminal record for assault and theft. At that time, Danny was in custody for another charge, but it was confirmed that he was free when Justin went missing. Investigators interviewed Danny at the detention center. Although he denied being involved in the incident, his statements were inconsistent. The police had his photo and showed it to the bartender, who recognized Danny immediately. He remembered seeing Danny with another man who seemed nervous and agitated. Though Danny hadn't been drinking much, he changed clothes in the restroom and threw something in the trash as he left. His testimony supported investigators' suspicions that a third person was involved. Justin's phone was later found in a dumpster near where his car was discovered. Although the phone was damaged, forensic experts managed to retrieve the call logs and text messages. These records indicated that, in the hours leading up to his death, Justin received texts from Bailey's number, followed by a phone call that prompted him to leave his home. In early July, investigators took an interest in a small motel in Arizona where a man and woman matching the descriptions of Jared and Bailey had stayed. The motel manager remembered them as quiet guests who paid in cash and requested not to be disturbed. After their stay, the motel's shower had been thoroughly cleaned, but traces of blood were found in the drain. On July 23, 2016, near an abandoned hangar in the desert, the body of a woman was discovered. It was Bailey Sharp. She had died from multiple stab wounds, and no personal items, identification, or phone were found with her. Additionally, Jared's fingerprints were found on a plastic bag near the dump site where Bailey's body had been hidden. The police became increasingly convinced that Jared had removed a potential witness, making him the primary suspect in both cases. On July 27th, a diner in Arizona reported seeing a man resembling Jared who dined alone and paid with cash. Surveillance footage confirmed it was Jared. Then, on July 30th, in New Mexico, a patrol unit stopped a car with a broken taillight. The driver appeared nervous and possessed fake identification. Fingerprint analysis revealed that it was Jared Bischoff. He was arrested. The authorities found cash, forged documents, and a backpack with clothing in his possession. During questioning, he remained calm and chose not to speak, but the evidence against him was strong. Blood traces matching Bailey's were discovered in a motel, and a knife was found in the apartment. Forensic experts affirmed that the blood on the knife matched blood found in Justin's car, the scene of the crime. Additionally, Jared's DNA was detected on the steering wheel and driver's seat of the car, indicating he had driven it after the incident. Danny Serrano's confession during a second interview ultimately resolved the case. Worried about receiving a life sentence, he decided to cooperate with authorities. He disclosed that Jared was the one who used the knife and fired the fatal shot. Danny also admitted to helping restrain Justin and participating in disposing of the body. His account was consistent with both digital evidence and physical findings. Investigators gathered substantial digital evidence, including geolocation data, message history, and patterns of communication. Forensic linguists analyzed messages sent to Tanya from Bailey's phone number and determined they were actually written by a man. This confirmed prior findings. Jared and Bailey had worked together, with Jared being the mastermind and the one who directly committed the crime. In the spring of 2017, a trial started for Jared Bischoff. He was indicted on charges of first-degree murder in connection with the death of Justin Hilbert and Bailey Sharp, conspiracy, and evidence destruction. The jury found him guilty on all charges, and he received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. His lawyer chose not to appeal the verdict based on the evidence presented. Additionally, Danny Serrano was charged by the district attorney's office with aiding and abetting in a first-degree crime and obstruction of justice. His trial occurred in the fall of 2017, and he was also found guilty by the jury. During sentencing, the court took into account his substance abuse issues and his lesser role in the crime, resulting in a 25-year sentence without the possibility of parole for the first 20 years. One of Jared's former military colleagues revealed that, before the crime took place, Jared often expressed intense resentment towards Tanya. He believed she had destroyed his life, taken everything from him. He saw her as something he owned, and her new partner as a challenge to his authority. What happened to Justin wasn't merely revenge. It was Jared's attempt to emotionally damage Tanya. At first, Jared intended to go after both Justin and Tanya. However, Danny reported that he changed his plan. Jared supposedly said that causing physical death would be too easy and that true suffering would come from leaving someone alive. He thought that if she survived, she would endure ongoing pain for the rest of her life. Jared believed Tanya's greatest suffering would come from losing the person she loved, experiencing fear and isolation, and having to face her son every day. For this reason, Justin became the target.
At first, building a business together seems ideal. There's trust, less risk of betrayal, and profits stay within the family. However, what happens when a small venture rapidly expands into a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar empire? The case of Andreen was complicated and unsettling. She went missing from her own home, and few believed she was still alive. However, without a body or strong evidence against the suspect, the investigation stalled. Months went by with no progress. The suspect seemed likely to go free. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, a local rancher made a shocking discovery that changed everything. Andreen McDonald, born Anderson, was born on September 23, 1989, in Port Antonio, Portland, Jamaica. Her parents were Jamaicans who immigrated to the United States. She is the second of 3 daughters. Known for her friendly nature, charm, and good looks, Andreen had many friends and received a lot of admiration. While in high school, Andreen formed a close friendship with Andre McDonald. Andre was also born and raised in Jamaica. He was the only child of Marina and Everton McDonald. His parents eventually separated while Andre was still in school, and his father moved to the United States, where he remarried another woman. In the early 2000s, Andre moved to Florida to live with his father. He attended the International Technical University and earned an engineering degree. Instead of following a career in engineering, he chose to enter the military, signing a contract and serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. Throughout his military service, Andre and Andreen maintained regular contact through calls, messages, and visits whenever he returned to Jamaica to see his mother. Their relationship deepened over time, evolving into a meaningful, long-term partnership, and they realized they couldn't imagine life without each other. After graduating high school, Andreen moved to the United States to be with Andre. About a year later, they had a small wedding with only their closest family and friends. Shortly after their marriage, Andre was transferred from sunny Florida to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. He quickly began planning for their future, and Andreen enrolled at the University of Texas to pursue a degree in economics. In 2013, they welcomed their daughter. Around the same time, they started a business by opening their first. The assisted living is called Starlight Homes. The venture quickly gained popularity, leading them to open a second facility in another city soon after. Within a few years, their network of assisted living was generating substantial income. While Andre continued his military career and traveled frequently for work, Andreen took charge of managing their multi-million-dollar business's daily operations. They purchased a beautiful home with a pool in an upscale neighborhood in Behar County, owned several luxury vehicles, and planned to expand their business into nearby states. In 2016, after her father's passing, Andreen brought her mother from Jamaica to live with them. Her mother helped around the house and cared for their daughter when both parents were busy. A few years later, they bought her a small, comfortable house nearby and gifted her a personal vehicle. In early 2019, 37-year-old Andre, a major in the U.S. Air Force, chose to move to the reserves. He wanted to stay in San Antonio to spend more time with his family and get more involved in their flourishing business, easing the workload for his wife, Andreen. Their company, which consisted of a network of assisted living facilities, was thriving and had grown across the state to be worth nearly $1 billion. From the outside, the McDonald family seemed to have it all: success, wealth, a bright daughter, and a successful business. However, beneath this facade of prosperity, tensions were starting to rise, issues unknown to most people. On Friday, March 1, 2019, 29-year-old Andreen did not show up for work, and her phone was turned off. This was very unusual for her. Concerned, her assistant and close friend, Carol, reached out multiple times but couldn't get in touch. Eventually, Carol and 2 colleagues decided to visit the McDonald home to check on Andreen. After knocking for a long time without an answer, Carol refused to leave and began walking around the house to investigate. In the backyard, she discovered something troubling, a charred spot with a zipper partially sticking out of the ashes, suggesting someone had been burning clothes. But who would do such a thing, and why? Nothing else appeared suspicious from the outside. When Carol pulled on the back door and found it unlocked, she stepped inside cautiously. She called out for Andrine and Andre but got no response. The house was eerily quiet, as if they had just stepped out. In the bathroom, she spotted odd streaks on the light switch that appeared to be dried blood, along with dark stains on the floor that raised alarm bells. Carol recorded her observations on her phone and contacted the local authorities to report her findings. Officers arrived quickly and began searching the home. Their discoveries heightened the concerns. The carpet in the master bedroom had been scrubbed with a strong industrial cleaner, leaving a lingering chemical smell. There were faint blood spots on the floor and a smear on the doorframe. Detectives thought this could be the scene of a serious crime, but the minimal blood left some hope that Andrine might be alive. Andre was unreachable by phone, and his location was unknown. Initially, the whereabouts of their daughter were also uncertain, but authorities soon confirmed she was safe at her paternal grandmother's house. All three of McDonald's vehicles were present, two were parked outside and the third, a Chevrolet Malibu, was in the garage. The car caught the officers' attention because it was covered in dust, indicating it had likely been on dirt roads recently, with small gravel stuck in the tires. Although there were no clear signs of damage or blood, the state of the car raised suspicions. While investigators were still inspecting the house, the homeowner, Andre, suddenly appeared at the front door. He appeared anxious and confused about the police presence on his property. When questioned about his whereabouts and what had happened, Andre stated that he had spent the night looking for his wife. He mentioned several hospitals he had visited to check if Andrine had been admitted. A follow-up confirmed that Andre had indeed gone to those hospitals. Additionally, at one of the hospitals, when the staff mentioned that someone with the last name McDonald had been checked in, Andre reportedly turned pale, stepped back, and quickly left without realizing it was just another person with the same last name. From the beginning, Andre's actions raised red flags. The officers decided to question him to hear his side of the story. Andre explained that he and Andrine had a domestic argument, so he left the house to calm down. When he came back, she was not there. He mentioned that he tried calling her multiple times, and when she didn't answer, he took their daughter to his mother's house and kept looking for Andrine. It was hard to track his movements because his phone had been turned off since the night before and stayed off until he returned. When the officers asked why his phone was off, Andre changed his demeanor and said he wouldn't answer any more questions without a lawyer. At that point, investigators realized something was off. However, without strong evidence, they had to release him after the first interview. He was given a travel restriction order and placed under discreet surveillance at his home. It was later revealed that on the same day Andrine went missing, he had made several concerning purchases at different hardware stores. He paid in cash for items such as a shovel, large heavy-duty trash bags, a small hatchet, work gloves, duct tape, and fire starter fluid. Andre seemed to be trying to leave no trace by keeping his phone off and not using a credit card. Nevertheless, law enforcement tracked him down using security camera footage from those stores. Meanwhile, forensic testing confirmed that the blood found at the home belonged to Andrine. As suspicions intensified, the police decided to detain Andre for further questioning and obtained a warrant to conduct a comprehensive search of his home, including the seizure and examination of all digital devices. During a brief period when he went missing, Andre returned home but left almost immediately, unaware that officers were tracking him. He stopped at a gun shop, where he bought a large-caliber handgun and a substantial amount of ammunition, paying in cash. Strangely, after completing the purchase, he turned and walked out of the store, leaving the firearm and ammunition on the counter. His demeanor appeared disconnected, his eyes were vacant, and his movements erratic, suggesting a loss of touch with reality. However, experienced officers suspected this behavior was an act, possibly a prelude to a future defense claiming mental instability. Andre was arrested as he exited the store, and he did not resist. Formal charges were filed against him. During a physical examination, investigators discovered fresh scratches on his hands and forearms, which appeared to be fingernail marks. Although Andre could not provide a clear explanation for these injuries, those present recognized the likely cause, a struggle. Nearly 48 hours had passed since Andreen was last seen. The increasing circumstantial evidence made it hard to believe she might still be alive. A large-scale search effort was launched, involving law enforcement, volunteers, and hundreds of concerned citizens. Teams searched the areas around San Antonio, particularly the rural parts of Bexar County, hoping to find clues to advance the investigation. Sadly, they found nothing useful, neither in the fields, wooded areas, nor urban zones. Even a thorough examination of the digital devices taken from the home, including a phone and tablet, did not produce any promising leads. However, when investigators conducted a second, more thorough search of the vehicles and garage, the case changed dramatically. They found newly purchased tools and supplies that matched items Andre had bought at several hardware stores. Then, in the trunk of Andre's Porsche Macan, they discovered a shovel wrapped in plastic. The shovel had strange dark stains on it and several long strands of hair attached to it. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood and tissue on the shovel matched Andreen's DNA. The hair strands were also hers. However, the handle had been wiped clean of fingerprints. When questioned, Andre claimed he had never seen the shovel before and suggested that someone must have planted it in his car. Despite the growing evidence against him, Andre posted bail, set at $2 million, which he paid immediately, allowing for his swift release. Once home, he did not join the ongoing search for Andreen. He maintained his story that they had an argument, he left to calm down, and when he returned, Andreen was missing. Andre claimed he tried to contact her afterwards, sending both voice and text messages. Some of these messages, which were found on his phone, contained emotional appeals, telling her their daughter was crying and urging her to come home. All of these messages were sent around midnight, after which his phone was turned off again. As the investigation into her disappearance continued without any leads, detectives decided to look into the McDonald family's background. They quickly discovered that their seemingly perfect relationship was misleading. In reality, their marriage was under significant strain for quite some time. Although they had built a successful business together that was growing rapidly and generating good income, most daily operations were handled by Andreen, especially while Andre was serving in the military. During Andre's 6-month deployment in Alabama in 2016, their emotional distance increased. Just before he was scheduled to return home, Andreen messaged him suggesting that they should go their separate ways and that he didn't need to come back. When Andre returned, he found out that while he was away, Andreen had begun a relationship with other man, Aubin Hall, whom she had known since her childhood in Jamaica, also her ex-lover. She even has a tattoo on her arm that is the letter A, the first letter of Aubin's name, which she says was a mistake of her youth. Aubin and Andreen reconnected during one of Andreen's visits to Jamaica, leading to a rekindling of their relationship. He started visiting her in Texas, and they decided they wanted to be together, prompting Andreen to file for divorce. Under Texas law, Andreen and Andre were required to divide their assets and business equally, which caused significant disagreement between them. Andreen felt entitled to a larger share because she managed the operations, while Andre argued that everything belonged to him since he had funded the initial startup. About 6 months later, the divorce proceedings were put on hold as they appeared to have reconciled, deciding to give their marriage another chance for the sake of their young daughter. However, despite this outward appearance of stability, underlying tensions remained. Andre had consistently opposed Andreen's trips back to Jamaica because he knew she would meet her former lover, leading to ongoing conflict between them, but Andreen continued to make her own decisions. Carol, Andreen's closest friend and the first to alert authorities after Andreen's disappearance, described Andre as controlling, manipulative. He believed that the business, their home, and even Andreen herself were his possessions, citing that he had brought her to the U.S., helped her gain citizenship, paid for her college education, and financed their first assisted living. Shortly before she went missing, Andreen confided in Carol, saying, "If anything ever happens to her, just know it was Andre." Just 2 weeks before Andrine disappeared, Andre found out that she had secretly registered a new company in her name and moved part of their shared assets into it. This discovery likely felt like a betrayal and may have contributed to the tensions between them. On July 11, 2019, 4.5 months after Andrine went missing, a local farmer named Clifton Clavin was walking on his property on the outskirts of San Antonio. Since the land was only partially cultivated, some areas had become overgrown. While surveying the grounds for future maintenance, Clifton noticed a strong, unpleasant smell that seemed to be related to decomposition. Assuming it was the scent of a dead animal, he followed it, intending to bury or remove whatever he found. In the tall grass, he first saw a skull and some bones that looked like they belonged to a cow. However, under some scattered branches, he discovered the real source of the odor, a nearly fully decomposed human body. Clifton immediately contacted the police. The remains were recovered and sent to a lab for analysis. The body was found unclothed, and while it was confirmed to be a woman, investigators could determine little else initially. Given the circumstances, many suspected that this was Andrine McDonald, and DNA testing later confirmed those suspicions. The medical examiner was unable to determine a clear cause of death due to the advanced decomposition of the body. However, pathologists found injuries including trauma to the jawbone and a fracture at the base of the skull, which matched the type of harm that could be caused by the hammer found in Andre's car. Additionally, much of her hair was missing, which was initially alarming. When the examiners observed partial burns on her right hand, they deduced that someone had tried to burn the body, probably to destroy evidence. As a result of these findings, Andre was officially charged with the crime and taken back into custody. The area where the remains were discovered had been searched several times by law enforcement and volunteers, but the exact location was on private property, behind a fence about 60 feet from the road, making it inaccessible without a warrant. This is why it had not been investigated earlier. When Andre learned that Andrine's remains were found and that evidence indicated she had suffered blunt force trauma, he changed his approach. He informed investigators that he was willing to share everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. After talking with his attorney, Andre presented a revised version of events, painting himself as a victim. He mentioned his wife's infidelity, her attempts to take over their business with her new partner, and his fear that she would take their daughter from him during a divorce. Andre reported that Andrine had recently mentioned ending their marriage again and had allegedly threatened to leave him without anything and take their daughter with her. That evening, they had a heated argument. Andre claimed that Andrine grew aggressive and started hitting him, which led him to defend himself. During the struggle, he said she got a minor cut. Andre admitted to pushing her, causing her to fall, and he then kicked her several times and stepped on her chest to keep her from getting back up. When he heard footsteps in the hallway and his daughter calling for her mom, he panicked. He quickly left the room before the girl could come inside, picked her up, took her back to her room, and told her that her mom would come to check on her later. Andre maintained that when he left the room, Andrine was still alive, lying on the floor with only a slight injury. However, when he returned, she was in the same position but unresponsive. He believed that he might have unintentionally contributed to a fatal outcome by applying too much pressure on her chest during the struggle. Realizing the seriousness of what had happened, Andre began to panic. He took off Andrine's clothes and burned them in his backyard. He then moved her body outside the city, leaving it on private property behind a fence near the remains of a cow. Later, he went home and sent many texts to Andrine's phone, begging her to return, hoping to make it look like she had simply left after a disagreement. Following that, he woke his daughter and took her to his mother's house, asking her to care for her granddaughter while he searched for his missing wife. To further support his story, he visited several hospitals, pretending to look for Andrine. He nearly fainted upon hearing that a woman with the same last name had been admitted to one of the hospitals. By the time the police brought him in for questioning the next morning, they still lacked strong evidence against him, so he was released. After being freed, Andre began to seriously consider ways to ensure the body would never be discovered. He even thought about dismembering and burning it, then scattering the remains in different locations. To do this, he purchased a hatchet, a shovel, fire starter fluid, and heavy-duty plastic bags. The following day, he returned to the location where he had left Andreen. However, when it was time to execute his plan, he could not go through with it. Instead, he poured flammable liquid on her body and attempted to light a fire, but it quickly went out, only burning her hair and partially charring one of her hands. Andre later described the failure as leaving him in a state of utter despair. In a moment of anger, he grabbed an old hammer from his car and struck the body several times before regaining his composure and stopping. He then covered the remains with branches and cow bones. When asked why he visited a gun store, purchased a pistol and ammunition, and then left the items at the counter, Andre stated he couldn't explain his actions. He mentioned that his thoughts were muddled, he hadn't slept for almost 2 days, and he wasn't thinking clearly. The trial faced significant delays, with hearings only commencing in January 2023. The defense team aimed to present Andre as a victim of his circumstances. His lawyers argued that Andreen and her boyfriend were allegedly conspiring to eliminate Andre from their lives to avoid splitting their assets during the divorce. Andre McDonald provided a detailed account of what happened to his wife, but the condition of her body made it impossible to verify his claims. Forensic experts could not determine her exact cause of death or whether her injuries occurred while she was alive or if, as Andre alleged, he hit her with a hammer after she died. What was evident, however, is that for 5 months, Andre stayed silent, trying to conceal the crime and evade responsibility. In February 2023, many were shocked when Andre was acquitted of first-degree murder charges. Instead, the jury convicted him of manslaughter and evidence tampering, resulting in a 25-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole after 15 years. His daughter was awarded to her maternal grandmother. The tragic saga of Andreen McDonald reveals the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences when hidden tensions erupt within a seemingly idyllic life. What began as a shared dream of building a family and a multi-million-dollar empire ended in betrayal, violence, and loss. Andre McDonald's conviction for manslaughter and evidence tampering in February 2023, carrying a 25-year sentence, brought partial justice but left lingering questions about the truth behind Andreen's death. As their daughter finds solace with her maternal grandmother, the McDonald case stands as a stark reminder that even the most prosperous facades can conceal deadly secrets, urging us to confront conflicts before they spiral into tragedy. Jennifer grew up in Oklahoma, raised by her mother, and had a brother named David. Although from a humble background, Jennifer had a good childhood. She completed high school and went on to study business at National University. Her friends described her as a very sweet woman. One thing that was dear to Jennifer was her faith. Whenever she thought about marriage, the first quality she wanted in a husband was his attachment to religion. Jennifer met 25-year-old Michael Blagg at a party. He was a helicopter pilot in the U.S. Navy and was stationed in San Diego at that time. Michael had grown up in a family that moved frequently because his father was a colonel in the Air Force. He was an incredibly well-behaved child, extremely intelligent, and hardworking. He consistently earning good grades, excelling in co-curricular activities. Michael was so bright that he got into the governor's honor program and attended Georgia Tech to study nuclear engineering. To afford college and complete his higher studies, he enlisted in the Navy. Jennifer was quickly drawn to him because he seemed to value faith as she did. The two began meeting frequently. Michael appeared to be a great family man in Jennifer's eyes, someone who would provide for her and their future children. Jennifer and Michael got married in 1991. While it was Jennifer's first marriage, Michael had been married before. However, that marriage only lasted a year before he parted ways with his first wife. After some time, Michael retired from the Navy and began a career as an engineer. The Blagg family moved to Simpsonville, South Carolina. They welcomed a baby girl named Abby. Jennifer loved living in Simpsonville. The family made new friends through their church, and Jennifer started teaching a women's Bible study group. Michael also became a co-teacher at the Bible school. Jennifer had found a strong, take-charge person in Michael. He was very caring, protective of her. However, according to Jennifer's friends, her behavior suggested otherwise. Sometimes, she becomes anxious and often panics when Michael is about to come home. Jennifer always focused on keeping the house in perfect condition so that Michael could have a comfortable environment when he returned from work. Despite all this, the Blagg family seemed happy. Things took a complete turn when Michael found a new job as operations manager at a manufacturing plant in Grand Junction, Colorado. Jennifer did not want to leave her happy routine in Simpsonville, but she felt compelled to be a dutiful wife to Michael. The family moved to Grand Junction in 2001, and Jennifer started to appear unhappy. It was evident that something was wrong in her personal life. At the time of the move, Jennifer was 34 years old, and Abby was just 6. Just a few months after moving to their new home, an incident occurred that shocked the entire community in Grand Junction. On November 13, 2001, Michael left for work early in the morning. Every day, he would leave early and return in the evening. Due to his protective nature, he would call Jennifer multiple times throughout the day to check if she and their daughter Abby were okay. However, when he called home after arriving at the office, no one picked up the phone. This was unusual since Jennifer always answered his calls. After waiting some time for her to call back, he tried again, but still, no one answered. Concerned for the safety of Jennifer and Abby, Michael left a voicemail. "Hope everything's okay." When there was still no response or news of Jennifer and Abby after several hours, Michael decided to leave the office early and check on his family. As soon as he arrived home, he called 911 and reported that both his wife and daughter were missing. He also informed the operator that there was blood all over the master bedroom of their house. Law enforcement authorities rushed to Michael's home. When police officers entered the bedroom, they found a significant amount of blood. Additionally, the jewelry box was tipped upside down, and Jennifer's purse was dumped on the floor with its contents scattered throughout the room. Initially believed to be a kidnapping case, the officers quickly changed their minds due to the volume of blood present. Kidnappings typically do not leave behind such a large amount of blood at the crime scene. Authorities recognized that there was another aspect to this story. Furthermore, the placement of the blood was peculiar. It was only on the bed, while the walls in the hallway were absolutely clean, with no drag marks in the house. While the investigation team was searching for a murderer, Michael appeared to believe that his wife and daughter had been kidnapped and were still alive. He even requested the public's help in locating his family and posted a reward of $3,000 for anyone who provided information about Jennifer and Abby. The Colorado River became the focal point of the investigation, as the police believed the victims' bodies might have been dumped in the area. While the investigators were searching the areas near the Colorado River, forensic experts were working inside the Blagg home to find any clues that might lead the authorities to Jennifer and Abby. According to people in the neighborhood, the last they had seen of the victims alive was a day earlier, when Jennifer came back home after picking up Abby from school. As forensic experts examined different parts of the house, they found blood in the family van. This was the point when Michael turned from a grieving husband and father to a suspect in a double homicide case. When he was interviewed, he claimed he didn't know anything about where Jennifer and Abby had gone. He said that he hadn't got a clue who would have any malice in their heart against anyone in their family and that Abby was a wonderful girl. Michael provided investigators with a timeline leading up to the incident. He stated that the night before his family went missing, Abby went to bed at her usual time of 7 p.m., while he and Jennifer stayed up late, as was their custom. Around 8 p.m., Jennifer received a phone call from a friend who invited her to lunch the following day. She accepted and planned to meet her friend before going to bed with Michael around 10 p.m. On the day of the incident, November 13, 2001, Michael woke up at approximately 5:30 a.m. to go to work. He noted that both Jennifer and Abby were still asleep since they typically woke up around 6:30 a.m. Michael usually called Jennifer several times during the day to check on her, and he did the same on November 13th. However, she did not answer his calls. At first, he did not think much of it, but after a few hours, he became concerned and returned home, only to find that both his wife and daughter were missing. It was evident to someone that November 13th would be an unusual day for Jennifer and Abby, as Abby's school received a call on November 12th. The caller informed the school administration that Abby would not be attending classes the next day. While the school did not know who made the call, They recorded that Abby was expected to be absent on November 13th. In addition to the previously mentioned voice notes, more were discovered. One of them included the message in which the sender greeted his bride and expressed hope that she was out enjoying herself and doing exciting things. As the investigation expanded, the officers began to strongly suspect that Michael had something to do with the disappearance of Jennifer and Abby. Michael, on the other hand, constantly denied this, even criticized the police for considering him a suspect in the case. He told the press that it bothered him to be looked into, despite the fact that he had lost his wife and daughter. A month after Jennifer and Abby's disappearance, Michael moved out of the family home, stating it was too hard to stay in the house where he lost them. While investigators did their job, Michael kept making frequent appearances in the media, saying he believed this was a case of burglary gone wrong. Michael even bought Christmas presents for Jennifer and Abby, told everyone he hoped they would be home soon to open them. People were sympathetic towards Michael because he wasn't only grieving the loss of his family, he was also a suspect in their possible murder. However, police and some of Jennifer's friends believed Michael had something to do with his wife and daughter's disappearance. As time passed, the suspicion grew stronger due to new evidence and witness testimonies, yet Michael maintained his innocence. Initially, he denied having any fight with Jennifer before she and Abby disappeared, but investigators later found a note in which Michael apologized to Jennifer for letting the devil get a foothold in their lives. However, that wasn't as strange as the discovery of thousands of adult images in the Blagg home. When questioned about them, he claimed Jennifer had downloaded these images because she wanted to be a good wife and serve her husband. One of Jennifer's friends also provided the police with peculiar information. According to her accounts, right before Jennifer and Abby went missing, Jennifer called her and asked if they could visit her, stating that Michael would not be with them. This was unusual for she, who knew the Blagg family always traveled together. In February 2002, Michael was caught stealing a shredder and a table from his office. He was brought in for questioning about the theft. While answering questions from investigators, Michael kept asking about the possible penalties for murder. This behavior was particularly strange coming from someone whose wife and daughter had disappeared a few months prior. Investigators compiled all their information on Michael and tried to crack him under questioning. One day, when the officers rang Michael's bell, no one answered the door. They could hear the sound of running water coming from inside the house, but no one responded to the knocks on the door. Suspecting something was wrong, the police kicked the door open. When they entered the bathroom, they found Michael lying in the bathtub with his wrists cut. There was also a photo of Jennifer and Abby with him, along with a note saying that he didn't kill his wife or daughter. He was quickly taken to the hospital and given medical care. Due to the harsh winters in Colorado, the search operation was halted until spring. After the initial attempts, the search resumed in April. Investigators marked a 45-kilometer radius for the search operation, but they couldn't find any clues regarding the bodies of Jennifer or Abby. In the meantime, one of Michael's co-workers called the police and shared an important tip. On the day of Jennifer and Abby's disappearance, Michael's colleagues saw him taking the trash out at work. Michael was pushing a pallet jack with 2 large cardboard boxes, which he discarded on the loading dock that led to the trash compactor. The co-worker, unaware of the contents of the trash, even asked Michael if he needed any help discarding it. A person discarding normal trash would have said yes, but Michael Black immediately declined the offer. It was unusual for someone working as an engineer in the company to have anything to do with trash handling. This was an important lead that could take the authorities to Jennifer and Abby's bodies. The first task was locating the landfill where Michael's firm was dumping their trash. Once the landfill site was tracked, the most challenging aspect remained: locating the possible areas in the landfill where trash from Michael's company might have ended up. When this development was revealed to the public, a normal person would have been happy that the case of his wife and daughter's disappearance was nearing closure. However, Michael did exactly the opposite and left the state. It was particularly strange that Michael never shared his plans or his whereabouts with anyone, including the police. Nearly 7 months after Michael's wife and daughter went missing, the authorities finally discovered what they had been searching for. On June 5, 2002, after weeks of searching, they located Jennifer's body in a landfill, wrapped in a red and black tent. The body was unwrapped, cleaned, and sent for an autopsy. The results of the autopsy shocked everyone, including Jennifer's family and friends. She had been shot in the left eye, with the bullet still lodged in her skull. The report indicated she was killed while sleeping, as investigators found a retainer in her mouth that she only wore at night. After discovering Jennifer's body, investigators suspected that Abby's body was also in the same landfill. They intensified their search efforts to find Abby's remains, but despite 7 weeks of searching, sifted through approximately 7,000 tons of trash, the police could not locate her. Michael Blagg was in custody. The police had a strong reason to arrest Michael, but they faced a challenge: no one knew his whereabouts. After some investigation, they discovered that Michael's mother lived in Georgia, leading them to believe he might be hiding with her. This suspicion turned out to be correct. When the police searched her house, they found Michael there. He was quickly arrested and transported back to Colorado to face charges for the murders of his wife and daughter. This was the first time the public learned that the man pretending to be a grieving husband and father was actually his family's murderer. At this point, Michael's first wife also spoke out in the media, claiming he was a normal person who had never abused her during their marriage. However, as the investigation continued, it became clear that the Blagg family's life was not as perfect as it appeared. From the start, Jennifer and Michael frequently argued. After they married, Jennifer discovered that Michael was not the religious man she believed him to be. He attended parties, which Jennifer disapproved of due to her religious values. Despite her repeated requests for him to change what she considered unacceptable behavior, Jennifer ultimately told Michael he needed to choose between her and his partying lifestyle. Michael promised Jennifer that he had changed his ways, and their relationship seemed to improve. This period also saw the birth of their daughter, Abby. However, Michael's commitment to the Navy meant he was often away, which contributed to Jennifer experiencing postpartum depression after Abby's birth. When Michael left the Navy and took a job teaching Sunday school, Jennifer learned something alarming: he had begun behaving inappropriately with the children. He was sharing his conservative views on sensitive issues like abortion and intimate, which ultimately led to his dismissal. This incident exacerbated the Blagg family's financial troubles, as they were struggling to sell their previous home. When the house finally sold, they incurred a loss of over $8,000. Jennifer frequently spoke to her friends in Simpsonville about her dissatisfaction with life in Grand Junction. Despite her unhappiness, she expressed a willingness to remain in Colorado to support Michael, as he seemed content with his job. Meanwhile, as the police sought to uncover the motive behind Michael's alleged murders, a legal firm employee came forward and revealed that Jennifer had visited their office just days before she went missing. She was visibly upset and wanted to consult an attorney. It was later revealed that Jennifer was a victim of abuse at the hands of Michael and was seeking a divorce. Investigators examining Michael's computer discovered that he regularly used an escort service. Interviews with the escort service employees revealed that Michael often visited for massages from topless women. When questioned, Michael claimed that his wife was aware of this because they were having intimate issues, and he went to the massage center for research. However, it was later revealed that Michael had a strong addiction to adult movies and had coerced Jennifer into watching it with him. This explained why Jennifer wanted to separate from Michael. Her diary indicated she was very religious, continually praying and trying to strengthen her relationship with God. Additionally, investigators found a note in one of Jennifer's books where she described a recent argument with her husband. The evidence and testimonies against Michael clearly indicated that he was abusive and pressured Jennifer into unwanted situations. When she resisted, he decided to kill her to hide his secret life and addictions. This also shed light on the disappearance of Abby. Investigators believed she may have witnessed her father's murder of her mother, leading Michael to kill her as well. Due to insufficient evidence linking Michael to the murders of Jennifer and Abby, the prosecution opted not to pursue the death penalty. Michael was granted bail and allowed to live with his mother while he awaited trial. In March 2004, his trial began, and he faced charges of first-degree murder. The prosecution argued that Michael killed his wife because she wanted a divorce. Afterward, he wrapped the bodies of his wife, Jennifer, and their daughter, Abby, and took them to his workplace, where he discarded them. He then acted as if nothing had happened, calling home multiple times and leaving voicemails to give the impression that he was completely unaware of the situation. On November 13th, he called the police, claiming it was a case of home invasion. Jennifer's mother, Marilyn Conway, testified that Jennifer had abused her daughter multiple times during their marriage, including an incident where he choked her while intoxicated. The defense attorney claimed that an intruder broke into their home, killed Jennifer and Abby when they tried to resist. Throughout the trial, Michael insisted he was innocent and not involved in the murders of his wife and daughter. On April 16, 2004, a jury convicted Michael Blagg of murdering his wife, sentencing him to life in prison without parole. However, 10 years later, the conviction was overturned because one of the jurors had falsely reported their history of domestic violence on the juror questionnaire. This led to Michael being granted a retrial, but the Colorado Supreme Court issued an emergency stay to keep him in prison while he awaited the new trial. Michael Blagg's retrial commenced in February 2018, during which his lawyers presented new evidence in hopes of proving his innocence. They also challenged the investigative methods used in the original case. Despite these efforts, Michael was again found guilty of killing his wife and received the same life sentence as before, concluding this tragic case. Abby's body was never found, so Michael was not convicted of any crime related to Abby due to lack of evidence. Laura Peacher, 28, was last seen on October 16, 2018, dining at a bar in Sebring. 3 days later, a restaurant employee in Tampa called 911 after finding something suspicious near a dumpster. Laura was a vibrant and social woman. She was born in Michigan in 1989, had an older sister and brother. Laura was born with a short left arm, featuring a thumb and 2 fingers. Throughout her life, she faced discrimination due to her physical difference, but she persevered and remained positive. Laura worked as a job coach at Goodwill, supporting individuals with physical and mental disabilities. Despite her own challenges, her disability was just a part of her unique character. Laura grew up in Michigan before moving to Sebring, Florida, at age 26. She relocated to assist her aging grandmother, demonstrating her caring nature by leaving her job to be there for family. On the morning of October 19, 2018, a 911 call was made by restaurant employees who discovered a woman's body near a dumpster behind their establishment. They reported a foul odor, initially suspecting it was from a dead animal. Upon closer inspection, they found what appeared to be a deceased woman. When detectives arrived, they found the victim face down, partially undressed, with a plastic bag over her head, part of the body covered by a wooden board. She was identified as Laura Peacher, wearing a dress that had been pulled down below her breasts. Her hands were tied behind her back with a purse strap. A search of the dumpster uncovered a clear plastic bag containing personal items, including mail and a wallet with an identification card. Investigators discovered that Laura was not from Tampa but lived in Sebring, Florida, roughly 2 hours away. She owned a silver Toyota Tundra pickup truck, which she likely used to travel to Tampa. However, her pickup truck was not found in the parking lot near the crime scene. It was later reported as stolen and added to a law enforcement database for recovery efforts. Investigators spoke with the restaurant manager about the situation. The restaurant owners had cleaned the parking lot just 2 days before, on Wednesday. Since Laura's body was found on Friday morning, it was likely placed there between Wednesday and Friday. The medical examiner conducted an autopsy and discovered clear marks on Laura's neck, suggesting she had been strangled with a thin, rope-like object. Additional signs on her body indicated that she had been on the ground for an extended period, with noticeable discoloration of her skin. The medical examiner determined that Laura had died on Wednesday, 2 days before her body was found. Meanwhile, 1,200 miles away in Michigan, police informed Laura's family about her death. Her parents were devastated and made a 20-hour journey from Michigan to Sebring. Meanwhile, her pickup truck was still missing. The investigators knew they needed to piece together the timeline of Laura's final hours to solve the case. They aimed to uncover why Laura had traveled from Sebring to Tampa, who she had met, and the whereabouts of her pickup truck. Detectives first examined Laura's cell phone records. They found that on Wednesday, between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., she received calls but stopped answering her phone, indicating something had gone wrong. The records also revealed that she made 2 calls that morning to a man. Laura's friends identified him as her boyfriend, making him the first potential suspect. Detectives wanted to speak with he to determine when he last saw Laura and whether there were any issues in their relationship. Before they could locate Laura's boyfriend, police received a tip that Laura's pickup was seen outside a convenience store in Tampa. Detectives rushed to the store, located 3 miles from where Laura's body was found. Upon arrival, they discovered that the pickup truck was no longer there. However, both the exterior and interior of the store were equipped with surveillance cameras. The detectives hoped these would provide critical information. After reviewing the camera footage, investigators saw a pickup truck arrive and park at the store. Although they attempted to zoom in for better clarity, the video quality was poor, preventing them from identifying the driver. Once parked, a man got out of the passenger seat, indicating that there were at least 2 people in the vehicle. This man seemed aware of the cameras, as he kept his head down and wore a baseball cap. He entered the store, but again, the video quality made it impossible to see his face. The man tried to steal some beer, but store employees stopped him. After leaving the store, he returned to the pickup and sat in the passenger seat, while the driver remained in the vehicle and was not visible on the cameras. About an hour later, patrol officers found Laura's pickup truck parked on the road, showing signs of a minor accident. The same man seen in the surveillance footage was sitting in the passenger seat. Upon his arrest, he identified himself as Calvin Gary. He was on probation and wearing an ankle monitor. There was no one in the driver's seat of the pickup truck, only a pair of abandoned shoes, suggesting that the driver had run away. Laura's pickup was sent to forensics for a detailed search for any evidence while detectives began interviewing Calvin. He claimed he had obtained the truck from a man known as Hot. Calvin stated that Hot had recently arrived in the neighborhood and that they had plans to steal beer from a convenience store. When detectives asked Calvin if he knew how Hot acquired the pickup, he said he did not know. He maintained that he had no information about Laura or what had happened to her. Calvin described Hot as a relatively short African-American male. He also provided detectives with Hot's location, guiding them to a specific address. Upon arriving, the detectives found Hot hiding in a bush, trying to avoid being seen, but they spotted him. They called for him to come out. When he did, he was wearing a shirt and pants but no shoes. The detectives asked the man to identify himself, but he refused to provide his name and was uncooperative. They then requested that he walk over to their pickup truck, which was equipped with technology for quick fingerprint identification. When they scanned his fingerprint, it matched a record in their database, revealing that his real name was Gary Tyrone Danielle. He had a long criminal record and had been incarcerated 3 times. Additionally, Danielle was from Sebring, the same town where Laura lived. Because he was not wearing shoes, detectives became even more suspicious that he may have been driving Laura's pickup truck. However, at that time, the police did not have sufficient evidence to charge him with a crime, so they had to release him. The investigators then focused on Calvin Gary, who, along with Gary Danielle, had driven Laura's pickup truck. Since Calvin wore a monitoring device, law enforcement could track his whereabouts. They found that he had never gone to the dumpster where Laura's body was discovered, nor had he visited Sebring, where she lived. Because of this evidence, the police ruled him out as a suspect. After interviewing Laura's boyfriend, detectives also cleared him as a suspect thanks to his solid alibi. He told them that on the evening of Tuesday, October 16th, Laura had gone to a bar in Sebring. This detail was significant since Laura had been at the bar the night before her death, prompting detectives to visit the bar and talk to the staff. The manager revealed that Laura often stopped by for a meal since she lived nearby. The last time she had been there was on the night of Tuesday, October 16th, and she appeared to be friendly and happy, with no unusual behavior noted. Detectives discovered that the establishment had surveillance cameras that recorded everything. They reviewed the footage, which confirmed the bar manager's account. Laura was wearing the same dress as when her body was found. She was sitting at the bar, chatting with a waitress, had not ordered any alcohol, and nothing unusual was happening. She only spoke to the waitress before leaving around 11 p.m. Further investigation revealed that about 4 hours after Laura left the bar, a witness saw her with a man. Around 2:45 a.m., the witness spotted her at a gas station near a convenience store on the other side of town. At that time, Laura was in her pickup truck and appeared to be fine. There were no signs that she was in distress or needed assistance. The witness also stated that Laura drove away with a man. Investigators went to the gas station where Laura was last seen and reviewed the surveillance footage. At 2:54 a.m., they saw Gary Danielle enter the store to buy cigarettes and talk to another customer before leaving. Another camera recorded Laura's pickup truck backing out of the parking lot and onto the highway. This sighting aligned with an eyewitness report stating that they saw Danielle and Laura together at the gas station near Sebring early Wednesday morning. To find clues linking Gary Danielle to Laura's murder, investigators examined items found in a dumpster. They discovered a partially torn ATM receipt that provided details leading law enforcement to a specific ATM at a gas station in Lakeland. The receipt showed a transaction occurred at 3:30 p.m. on Wednesday, 12 hours after Laura was last seen in Sebring. Detectives then visited the gas station where the ATM was located, hoping the surveillance footage would help them solve the case. After reviewing the footage, investigators located Laura's pickup truck, but they couldn't identify who was inside. Luckily, there were several cameras, and after the truck was parked, they captured Gary Danielle getting out and walking to the store. He withdrew cash from the ATM, purchased a soda, and then left the store. Laura did not get out of the truck and was never seen, leading detectives to conclude that she was likely dead by the time Danielle returned to the truck and drove toward the location where her body was eventually discovered. Danielle was taken to the police station for questioning. At that time, the police only had evidence that he had used Laura's pickup truck, so they began asking him about it. Danielle claimed that he found an unlocked truck with the keys inside and decided to take it. He stated that was the only action he took, and he had no knowledge of who owned the pickup. He mentioned that the interior of the truck appeared normal and he didn't observe anything unusual. The detectives showed Danielle a picture of Laura and asked if he recognized her. He said he did not know her. When they inquired if he had ever met Laura in Sebring, he again replied no. They informed him that they had surveillance camera footage from a gas station in Sebring that showed him with Laura. Danielle understood that the police suspected him of Laura's murder and chose not to answer any more questions. At that point, the detectives lacked physical evidence to prove to a jury that Danielle had killed Laura. There is a specific time limit for a person to stand trial, which begins when the suspect is arrested. Since the detectives were still awaiting forensic results, they decided to release Danielle. Although there was a significant risk that he might flee, forensic analysis provided substantial insights into the case. Experts discovered drops of Laura's blood in the back seat of her pickup truck. This indicates that her body was likely in the back seat at some point after her death, or that the crime occurred inside the truck. Investigators received a forensic report on items found near Laura's body, which showed DNA on the strap used to bind her hands. This DNA matched that of Danielle. Additionally, his DNA was found under Laura's fingernails. The DNA evidence and surveillance footage were sufficient to file charges, leading to Gary Danielle's arrest. At the time of his arrest, Danielle did not make any statements and chose to exercise his right to remain silent. He faced charges of first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and grand theft of a motor vehicle. Using the evidence collected, investigators attempted to create a timeline of Laura's final hours. They confirmed that she had been at a bar in Sebring alone and left the bar around 11 p.m. Following that, she went to the town center, where she met friends. On that same night, she encountered Gary Danielle for the first time, with no prior relationship between them. Investigators suspect that Laura may have agreed to give Gary Danielle a ride, possibly in exchange for money. Danielle's refusal to answer questions has left investigators uncertain about how he and Laura first met. However, it is known that Laura and Danielle were seen together at a gas station, where an eyewitness confirmed that Laura appeared alive and unharmed in her pickup truck. After leaving the gas station, something occurred that led to Laura being found strangled in her truck. The exact location of the truck at the time of her death is still unknown. 12 hours after the last sighting of Laura's truck in Sebring, surveillance cameras captured it at a gas station 25 miles outside of Tampa. At that time, Danielle was withdrawing cash from an ATM. He then drove to Tampa, where he concealed Laura's body next to a dumpster in a restaurant parking lot. Her body was discovered 2 days later. The trial for Laura's murder did not begin until nearly 3 years after her death, a delay largely due to global events. Laura's father, Art Peacher, spent a long time waiting to confront the man responsible for his daughter's death in court. Rather than condemning Danielle, he chose to remember Laura by sharing a story about her kindness. Art recalled an incident where a young boy pointed out Laura's short arm, and another boy mentioned her asthma. Laura responded, "Don't you know there's something wrong with everyone?" Her father presented several items in court that belonged to his daughter, including her journal. The cover of the journal had the phrase, "Live the life you've imagined." Inside, she had written about her dislike for cooking since she lived alone and had no one to help with the dishes. She also expressed her hatred for littering and shared her thoughts about her 4 tattoos. The most significant tattoo for her was a blackbird, which was a tribute to her sister-in-law who had passed away, inspired by a song. On August 24, 2021, Gary Danielle, age 50, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder as part of a deal with state prosecutors. In return for his plea, he accepted a 30-year prison sentence. He also confessed to charges of tampering with evidence and stealing a motor vehicle. During the short court hearing, Danielle, who is bald, has a short gray beard, and was dressed in orange jail clothing and handcuffed, remained silent in the jury box and did not address Laura Peacher's family. While the guilty plea concluded the legal proceedings, it left many questions unanswered, such as the reasons behind Laura's murder and how she came to be in contact with Danielle.